Chapter 26-29. An Eighth Heaven Celestial King moves. A mere Fifth Heaven Celestial King. Quickly throw down your sword and surrender. That Eighth Heaven Celestial King stood with his hands crossed behind his back, appearing very powerful and authoritative. He naturally had the right to do this. He was an Eighth Heaven Celestial King, merely a single cultivation level away from the peak battle prowess of the Celestial King graveyard. He naturally had the right to make demands, and could act domineering. The Empress couldn't be bothered to even respond. With Celestial Tool in hand, she wanted a battle. "I am Zhang Tianyan," that Eighth Heaven Celestial King announced. "Seeing as how your natural talent is not too bad, I will give you a chance to survive. As long as you are willing to become my disciple, I can spare your life, and can teach you supreme techniques." He coveted the Empress's exquisite beauty. It was a lie that he was going to take her as a disciple. The truth was that he wanted to make her his mistress. The Empress shouted lightly, and took the initiative to attack. "You are biting off more than you can chew." Zhang Tianyan smirked coldly. He delivered a palm strike, and Wang, a frightening pressure assailed. Regulations took solid form, pressing down on the Empress. Pang! The Empress was instantly sent flying. Though she was very strong, she could not compare to Ling Han, so how could she match an Eighth Heaven opponent when she herself was only in the Fifth Heaven? Thankfully, the Celestial Tool sliced apart the regulations, so she was not too heavily injured. "Where's that brat?" Zhang Tianyan's gaze wandered. He feared that Ling Han would flee directly when he saw Zhang Tianyan move. If that happened, Ling Han really might be able to escape. The Empress gave no answer. She grabbed out with her left hand, and boundless water vapor and lightning were drawn towards her. Meanwhile, grass sprouted on the ground, trying its best to grow. Zhang Tianyan looked slightly surprised. Regulations of water, wood, and lightning were rapidly being drawn and fused in the Empress's hands. Ordinarily speaking, a Fifth Heaven Celestial King definitely could not possibly gather so many regulations. This had reached the Seventh Heaven Celestial King tier. Interesting. Zhang Tianyan's eyes slightly lit up. This little girl has actually grasped a secret technique, and it seems very extraordinary. He was greatly moved. He could obtain both the beauty and a secret technique. He was really coming back with full rewards this time. In comparison, even if he did not capture that man from before, it did not seem all that important now. In any case, other Celestial Kings would still move. "I'll have to see exactly how extraordinary this secret technique is," Zhang Tianyan thought to himself. As he thought this, the Empress had completely gathered the three kinds of regulations. Divine Fluid Raging Lightning had fused with Azure Wood Chaotic Lightning, turning into lightning of water and wood. A greenish-black spear of lightning appeared, gripped in the Empress's hand. "This truly is very extraordinary. If I was the slightest bit careless, this attack could even rip through my defense." Zhang Tianyan mumbled, his eyes even brighter. The reason he had entered this place was so he could obtain the remaining 6 parts of the 9 Transformations Divine Scroll. Yet now he discovered that the secret technique the Empress possessed was not the slightest bit inferior to it. This was a great profit. Crack! The Empress moved, throwing the lightning spear, which shot rapidly towards Zhang Tianyan. Zhang Tianyan was proud of his own strength, and naturally would not even bother to dodge. He stretched out a hand and grabbed the lightning spear. Great Tao wrapped around his hand, and practically no technique could touch him. Pah! However, he clearly overestimated his own strength, and also underestimated the might of this heavenly venerate technique. Though he had got hold of the lightning spear, the lightning was still wreaking havoc, and still caused his right hand to explode, blood seeping from the wounds. This could only be considered minor injury, but the attack of a Fifth Heaven Celestial King could actually make an Eighth Heaven Celestial King bleed. By itself, this was an extremely rare event. Yet Zhang Tianyan was not furious, but rather delighted. The power of the lightning spear was too strong, but it also brought him a great pleasant surprise. If he could obtain this secret technique, then could he use this to intimidate Ninth Heaven Celestial Kings? He laughed loudly, and he approached the Empress quickly with a flash. Since he had already witnessed the might of this secret technique, he had also lost his patience. Now he was going to capture the Empress, and gain both her and her secret technique for himself. It was true that the Empress was proud, but she was not stupid. Since an eighth heaven celestial king had unleashed his might, how could she possibly face him head-on? With a quick flash of her figure, she dodged. You want to escape from me? You are truly dreaming. Zhang Tianyan laughed loudly. His large hand descended, and everything within 5 km of him had fallen under his control. Even regulations would have to submit to him. That was how domineering an eighth heaven celestial king could be. The Empress remained cold. The celestial tool in her hand slashed out, forcefully cutting out a path for herself. A celestial tool? Zhang Tianyan was taken back, and then laughed loudly. He was really overjoyed by now. This was not just 2 birds with 1 stone, but 3. He could actually gain a celestial tool as well with this move. Was this a supreme opportunity that the heavens had bestowed on him? Where are you running to? He moved once more, drawing on the regulations of heaven and earth, which turned into multiple pillars that surrounded the Empress. The Empress brandished the celestial tool to open a path for herself, while her left hand continued to use lightning of water and wood to deliver blasts at Zhang Tianyan, forcing him to slow down. Back and forth, Zhang Tianyan shockingly discovered that he actually was unable to do anything against the Empress. It was not that the Empress was heaven-defyingly powerful, but rather that the celestial tool she had in her hand could cut through anything and everything. Even the prison that he had formed from regulations was easily sliced through, and more importantly, he also had reservations in his offensive. He was not willing to harm the Empress. He wanted to capture for himself a complete, flawless beauty, and that was how the Empress managed to easily evade him every time. After several times, Zhang Tianyan had gradually lost his patience. In his eyes, the Empress was no longer a person, but rather a treasure chamber. He was determined to obtain her, and she was not to be shared with anyone else either. If he had to injure her, so be it. In any case, as long as the core of a celestial king was not injured, any injury could be quickly recovered. With these thoughts, the intensity of his attacks increased countless times over, causing the Empress to be seemingly in a difficult situation. It could not be helped. The gap in cultivation level was too wide. The fact that the Empress could hold on until now was already very, very impressive. If you do not want to suffer any longer, surrender quickly, Zhang Tianyan demanded coldly. 4 celestial kings like him, once they had steadied their resolve, their will definitely could not be shaken. No matter how pitiful the Empress looked, it was not enough to soften his heart. The Empress still stayed silent. What worth did this damn bug have to make her speak? Stubborn. Zhang Tianyan humphed, and slashed out his palms towards the Empress like they were 2 axes. Even if he was wary of the might of the celestial tool, and dared not approach too close, with the attack that was driven by the cultivation level of an 8th heaven celestial king, every palm strike would be heavy as a mountain, smashing forcefully through regulations, and also made it extremely difficult for the Empress herself to draw on any regulations. This was the strength of a high-level celestial king. With their superior cultivation level, they could directly empty out all regulations in the area, and lower-level celestial kings would not be able to draw on regulations. They would be forcefully suppressed to the severing mundane tiers. The Empress could only use the celestial tool to attack him. It was not affected by Zhang Tianyan, and could destroy anything in this world. Just sit down obediently. Zhang Tianyan laughed loudly. He had already grasped the upper hand completely. Pressing down a single palm, he wanted to crumble all of the Empress's battle prowess. But when he lowered his palm, he discovered that he had actually become exceedingly slow. Regulations of time? He was surprised. Faced with his great power, the Empress should not have been able to draw on any kind of regulations at all. So where had these regulations of time come from then? Moreover, being able to use regulations of time when she herself was not yet 9th heaven, just how heaven-defying was the good luck of this pretty little girl. Xiao. The Empress took advantage of the opening to slice out of the siege and once again escape. She had used the greatest eternity everlasting physique. Her own physique naturally could not possibly be sealed by Zhang Tianyan. Otherwise, that would mean that she had already fallen into his hands. I don't believe this. How could it be that I can't capture a little 5th heaven celestial king like you? Zhang Tianyan was also truly angered now. He, a great 8th heaven celestial king, had moved, and actually had not been able to capture his prey after such a long time. Oh, is that right? Ling Han's cold voice rang out. Chapter 26:30. Intense Battle. Ling Han studied the veins in the lava for a while, and after he discovered he was close to his limits in maintaining the channeling of the indestructible Heaven's Scroll, he flew out, and then witnessed how Zhang Tianyan was presently hunting down the Empress. This naturally filled him with extreme fury. He immediately flashed out, and attacked Zhang Tianyan. Zhang Tianyan was slightly startled. He had not thought that the brat would actually be hiding inside the lava. This lava pool was very frightening. The regulations of lightning and fire were flowing within, and even a ninth heaven celestial king would not deliberately run in. There were no benefits to be gained, so it would simply be a waste of their own power. What did you, a mere fifth heaven, run in there for? I will beat you till you burst. Without saying anything else, Ling Han directly charged over, his hands clenched into fists, with regulations wrapped around them. He burst out with his full power, having regulations wrapped around his fists, and activating his body art as well. He also had two heavenly venerate techniques which boundlessly boosted his battle prowess. This naturally made his attack incredibly violent. As he threw a punch, it was as if he was a true dragon in human form, exuding an incomparably formidable and terrifying aura. At first, Zhang Tianyan had considered Ling Han below his notice. The latter was only a mere fifth heaven celestial king, and did not have a celestial tool, either. What need was there for Zhang Tianyan to take Ling Han seriously? But when Ling Han attacked, Zhang Tianyan was immediately stunned. This battle prowess was strong enough to compare to the early middle stage of the 8th heaven celestial king tier. This was really crazy. Without any external factors, a 5th heaven celestial king was actually capable of unleashing battle prowess of a middle stage of the 8th heaven celestial king. Was he going to defy the heavens? Going by that accounting, once this brat reached 6th heaven, wouldn't he then be able to stand at the pinnacle of the celestial king tier, and stand equal to a 9th heaven celestial king? This couple was really too extraordinary. No wonder they dared to train here. They probably had a heavenly venerate backing them, right? However, this was the celestial king graveyard. A heavenly venerate would definitely not set foot here. This was a common agreement that all the heavenly venerates had agreed upon. Even if Zhang Tianyan killed Ling Han, he would have nothing to fear. There would definitely be no heavenly venerate that would enter this place to hunt him down. Do you think I am afraid of you? Zhang Tianyan smirked coldly. He was a late-stage 8th heaven celestial king. Though it was only slightly stronger than Ling Han, that was already enough. He also charged towards Ling Han, his hands slashing downwards. He was like a true dragon, like a terrifying beast from the primitive age. Ling Han laughed loudly, meeting the attack with both fists ready. Pang, pang, pang. The two great elites clashed. After the exchange of every single punch, shock waves would reverberate, and it was as if even the heavens would be collapsing at any moment. After exchanging over a dozen blows in a single stroke, Zhang Tianyan couldn't help but feel shocked. As expected, he indeed had the upper hand in terms of power, but Ling Han's physique was too frightening. Though the latter would be sent sliding backwards with every exchange, the vitality in his body was still burning brightly, without any sign of chaos at all. If this was another person, even if it was really a middle-stage 8th heaven celestial king, their vitality would definitely be stirred up in this kind of exchange, their battle prowess deteriorating. In fact, it was not impossible that they would even be directly sent flopping onto the ground from the impact. For Ling Han, who was clearly at a disadvantage, but still had no loss to his battle prowess, this was too inconceivable. How could there be someone like this? Ling Han seethed with fury, raining down punches. Damn old geezer, you actually dare hurt my wife. I am going to beat you into mush. Zhang Tianyan felt depressed. He had not wanted to hurt the Empress. He only wanted to capture her. Furthermore, a 5th heaven celestial king actually declared that he was going to beat him till he burst. How could he endure such humiliation? Brat, you are too arrogant. He was the first to change his tactic. With a shake of his right hand, a small golden tower appeared in his hand. The moment it appeared, it began spinning, and floated into the air above his head. The golden tower cascaded down precious qi. It could be seen that every streak of qi was extremely heavy, suppressing even regulations. This was not a celestial tool, but the materials used to forge it were also extraordinary. Furthermore, Zhang Tianyan had used his cultivation level of the 8th heaven to temper it constantly, so its might was truly no trivial thing. It could be claimed that not only was it not weaker than himself, it was even that slight bit stronger at that. Die! Against Ling Han, Zhang Tianyan did not have the slightest bit of reservations. Ling Han had been a target that he wanted to kill in the first place. He threw a punch, and as his power combined with the precious qi of the Golden Tower, the might was greatly magnified. Ling Han roared loudly, and still responded with a fist. Pang! This time, Ling Han was far from being a match for his opponent. He was sent flying with a single punch, and cracks rang out from all the bones of his body. If it were not for the fact that his physique was extremely strong, a great many of his bones would probably have broken from this one blow. You can't even withstand a single blow, Zhang Tianyan sneered. He was completely unconcerned that he had already drawn his precious tool, while Ling Han was still fighting with bare fists. A loss was a loss, and a victory was a victory. Anything else was just mere excuses. With a loud battle cry, he took the chance to follow up on his attack. Ling Han wiped the corner of his mouth. He knew that the gap in cultivation level was ultimately too wide. When he was using his bare fists, he would also only be able to match an 8th heaven celestial king that was unarmed. Once the latter drew his precious tool, and he was still in the same circumstances, his disadvantage would be too great. Old geezer, you are asking for your own suffering? Ling Han drew the divine demon sword. Cold light flashed, and it was as if a 9th heaven celestial king had appeared, exuding a harsh air of dominance over all. After devouring an adequate amount of divine metal, even if the divine demon sword had not reached the heavenly venerable tier, it still far surpassed the level of divine metal. At least it could already compare to a 9th heaven celestial king in terms of intimidation. N? Zhang Tianyan was stunned. This was yet another celestial tool. Fuck, how lavish. He was an 8th heaven celestial king, but he had only ever seen celestial tools himself even now, but this couple were only in the 5th heaven, yet both of them had a celestial tool in hand. In comparison, he, an 8th heaven celestial king, was really too poor. People who had come from outside were indeed different. They had a heavenly venerate backing them, and even celestial tools were things that they could easily gain. I will kill you. Ling Han wielded the sword and moved, slashing madly at Zhang Tianyan. You think you are capable? Zhang Tianyan almost died of fury. It should be known that he had come to kill these two outsiders who had come here to train. He drew on the precious qi of the Golden Tower, and threw a punch. The force of the attack turned into a golden battle wolf that pounced towards Ling Han. He was wary about the might of the celestial tool, and did not dare to battle in close quarters. Pooh! Ling Han's sword swept out, and that golden battle wolf was instantly slashed in half. Faced with the terrifying destructive power of the divine demon sword, it was impossible that the golden battle wolf would have any chance to attack again. It was directly destroyed. Zhang Tianyan was astounded. It was not that he had never exchanged blows with a celestial tool before, but while the celestial tool in the Empress's hands was still powerful, it had not had might like this. Ling Han attacked aggressively. With a wave of his left hand, the lightning of water and wood was unleashed, turning into a spear of lightning that was smashed towards Zhang Tianyan. Ling Han had long since channeled the 9 transformations divine scroll. Though it had not reached the greatest boosting effect, with 3 parts fused into one, this might was already considerably great. The lightning spear shot out fiercely, and the divine sword danced. He had completely taken the initiative in this battle. Zhang Tianyan was helpless. His world-shaking strength was useless here as he did not dare to fight a power battle against Ling Han. Even if he was an 8th heaven celestial king, definitely nothing good would happen if he tried a power battle with a celestial tool. Just think, a great 8th heaven celestial king was actually being suppressed by a 5th heaven celestial king. This was very inconceivable, yet it was truly and genuinely playing out now. Damn it! Damn it! Zhang Tianyan cursed. He had completely not foreseen this before he made his move. This couple's strength was really too great, especially in the case of Ling Han. He was so strong that it went beyond logic. You actually dare to use a tower-shaped precious tool. That is even more of a reason that I cannot spare you. Ling Han's eyes swept over the golden tower above Zhang Tianyan's head, his killing intent blazing even hotter. Though the black tower had already been snatched by Heavenborn, Ling Han was still heavily influenced by it. What he hated the most were tower-shaped precious tools. Zhang Tianyan felt like he didn't know what to say here. Fuck. Have I caused you any trouble just by forging my precious tool in the shape of a tower? Chapter 26:31. The greater the wounds, the stronger he becomes. I'll beat you up. Ling Han's right hand wielded his sword, but his left hand changed gestures frequently. At times it would be a palm strike, at times he would clench his hand into a fist, and sometimes he would send out a spear of lightning with a wave. Change was only a matter of thought for him. He had already walked out his own path. His cultivation was no longer limited by form, but would change as he willed it. Yet Zhang Tianyan felt horrible. Ling Han's attacks seemed completely chaotic and disorganized, yet were extraordinarily powerful. It looked like Zhang Tianyan had the upper hand in power, but when they actually fought, he fell into a disadvantage, which was something he couldn't understand. However, he was still an 8th heaven celestial king, after all. Looking at how Ling Han's calm face was enshrouded in precious qi, as if a god was about to walk out of him, he couldn't help but exclaim, "You have walked out your own path." He knew very well that if one wanted to become a heavenly venerate, the most basic, as well as the most important step, was to walk out one's own path. Every single heavenly venerate was unique and special. Even if Lin Luo had 3 heavenly venerate disciples, they had all taken that last step on their own. Their master only helped to guide them, but could not make it so that their descendants would follow in their footsteps every bit of the way. In this instant, Zhang Tianyan was extremely jealous. Though walking out one's own path did not mean that one would definitely become a heavenly venerate, if the most crucial step had already been taken, the largest barrier for breaking through to the heavenly venerable tier was already swept out of the way. This kind of person actually came into the Celestial King graveyard. "You are courting your own death," Zhang Tianyan declared coldly. His jealousy was ignited, making him want nothing more than to immediately kill Ling Han. "You coming here is just an act of suicide, and you even wounded my wife. Even tearing you into pieces is not enough to vent my fury," Ling Han shouted loudly. He drew his sword, boundless light illuminating the surroundings. He was keeping nothing back anymore, unleashing his battle prowess to the maximum limits. Zhang Tianyan did not believe that Ling Han could maintain his battle prowess at this height constantly, or that would be too illogical. Hence, he did not take even half a step back, his every move being a forceful clash with Ling Han. He wanted to blast Ling Han out of this state as soon as possible. By then, he would get Ling Han's head, and then capture the Empress. His rewards would be astonishing. Great opportunities naturally came with great danger. Now the greatest opportunity was laid out right in front of Zhang Tianyan, so wasn't it very normal that there would be danger as well? Wang, he used his trump card. Spiritual attack. This was too despicable. Even if Ling Han had long since prepared himself, it was useless. He felt a pain in his head, and he had already been hit by the spiritual attack. "I have to admit that you are indeed very strong, and also incomparably freakish, but you are too naive after all. The fact that your cultivation level is too low is a weakness that you cannot change." Zhang Tianyan took the chance to charge over. With how bountiful his battle experience was, he would attack madly once he got the slightest opportunity, and kill his opponent in a single stroke. Ling Han smirked, and suddenly sliced out with his sword. "What?" Zhang Tianyan paled in great shock. As he thought about it, even if Ling Han's spirit was not wounded upon being affected by his spiritual attack, Ling Han would be frozen for about half a breath's time at least. This was enough time for Zhang Tianyan to annihilate his opponent. This strike was far beyond his expectations. He wanted to dodge this strike hurriedly with a tap of his foot, but it was already too late. Blood sprayed out. Zhang Tianyan rapidly retreated 300 meters. He looked at the empty place where his left arm should be. It had been severed from the shoulder down, and there was blood gushing out. Gut. He forced out through clenched teeth. He had not thought that he, the hunter, would actually fall into the trap of his prey, and be deceived by his own experience. "I said I would kill you." Ling Han leaped out, delivering another strike with his sword. He was indeed still affected by the spiritual attack, but it could only cause him a slight sting now. It was like how his physical body would hurt after being cut, but he was absolutely capable of tolerating this pain with strong willpower. Zhang Tianyan released another spiritual attack, while his hands balled into fists, and delivered countless blows as well. Ling Han felt a storm raging in his mind. It was incredibly painful to sustain spiritual attacks, but the more that was the case, the wilder his fighting spirit would be. He slashed madly at Zhang Tianyan as he pursued the latter, determined to kill his opponent. Yet Zhang Tianyan did not have such a strong fighting spirit. While he could cause considerable damage to Ling Han with the spiritual attack, Ling Han was also coming close to him. Even if the divine demon sword did not strike Zhang Tianyan directly, the sharp sword qi was still enough to cause him great trouble. More importantly, Zhang Tianyan's left arm had already been directly severed by the divine demon sword. Endless murderous aura had also surged into his body through this injury, and was now wreaking havoc with wild abandon. How could the might of a celestial tool be underestimated? What more when the divine demon sword far surpassed an ordinary celestial tool in power? It was true that Zhang Tianyan was an 8th heaven celestial king, but it was still impossible for him to bear the destructive power of the divine demon sword. If Zhang Tianyan had the time to sit down and recover from his injuries, he would still be able to expel the murderous aura of the divine demon sword from his body bit by bit, but with Ling Han detaining him now, how could he possibly have the time? This was using his own injuries to trade for injuries on his opponent. Ling Han threw his mind on the line, letting it come under continuous attacks. Blood was already flowing out of all his apertures, but his own assault did not stop. His fighting spirit overwhelmed the heavens, and also caused massive trouble for Zhang Tianyan. Sword qi danced wildly, causing Zhang Tianyan to be heavily injured as well. Their injuries were different, but their severity was more or less the same. It would have to depend on who would be the first to fall. Zhang Tianyan soon revealed his intent to retreat. He feared that even if he did kill Ling Han, his own injuries would be too heavy, and he would die right alongside Ling Han. Zhang Tianyan was greedy, but as someone who had reached the height of 8th heaven, he naturally could control his own greed. Gritting his teeth, he turned and fled. There was absolutely no way he alone could take Ling Han down. What more when the Empress's battle prowess was not to be underestimated as well? Zhang Tianyan would leave, and find someone to help him. Then, he would return to suppress these two people. In any case, there were 2 celestial tools, which was enough to share. Have I allowed you to leave? How could Ling Han possibly allow Zhang Tianyan to flee? Regulations of space were unleashed, and space instantly manifested into layers, as if it was a swamp. If I want to leave, how will you stop me? Zhang Tianyan laughed madly. If an 8th heaven celestial king was determined to flee, it would be very difficult for even a 9th heaven celestial king to stop him. What more when it was just a mere 5th heaven celestial king that was chasing him? Not only will I stop you, I will kill you. Ling Han used regulations of space on himself, traversing the layers of space, and setting off in hot pursuit of Zhang Tianyan. Zhang Tianyan used regulations to boost himself. He stood at the height of 8th heaven. Merely in terms of regulations, he would naturally overwhelm Ling Han. Pang, pang, pang. Zhang Tianyan aggressively barged through the spatial barrier, his speed practically unaffected. But practically did not mean completely. Ling Han's speed was already astonishing in the first place. Once Zhang Tianyan was only slightly delayed, Ling Han immediately caught up with him, and swept out with the indestructible divine demon sword. Damn it! Zhang Tianyan had no choice. He could only turn around, and continue exchanging blows with Ling Han. It was still trading injury for injury. The injuries of the 2 of them also became more and more serious. One was injured from the inside out, and the other was injured from the outside in. Now that things had reached this point, it was actually a contest of willpower now. Whoever had the stronger willpower would be the last one standing. Pang! A punch landed on Ling Han, and Zhang Tianyan was also blasted by the lightning of water and wood. Both of them were throwing up blood endlessly. However, in the next instant, the 2 of them began a new exchange of blows. Pang! 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 The 2 of them bled endlessly, their injuries becoming gradually heavier. Zhang Tianyan discovered that his fighting spirit was becoming weaker and weaker, but on the other side, not only did Ling Han's battle prowess not weaken in the slightest, it was even increasing. This caused great shock to Zhang Tianyan. This kind of guy that would become stronger as his injuries became heavier was really too hard to deal with, especially in a situation when they were equally matched. The more you fought, the weaker you became, but your opponent would become stronger as the battle progressed. It was like cheating. How could you continue fighting then? I said I would kill you. Ling Han's fighting spirit soared directly into the clouds. His martial intent surged, and could not be stopped. Chapter 26-32. 3 Lightning Technique. After fighting intensely for 3 days, Zhang Tianyan died. He had died a very meaningless death. Even if he had encountered the strongest 8th Heaven Celestial King and had been outmatched, he would have been able to leave calmly. However, faced with Ling Han, he did not even have the chance to escape. He was forced to trade injury for injury, to the point that he died. Ling Han also flopped onto the ground. His injuries in this battle were also very heavy. Previously, he had been battling on a single breath, and now that Zhang Tianyan was dead, he could not hold himself up any longer, either. The Empress hurriedly delivered Ling Han into the celestial guest residence. It was augmented with the heaven-deceiving technique, and even if it was a 9th Heaven Celestial King that was carefully searching for it, he wouldn't necessarily discover its presence. Furthermore, even if it was discovered, it was forged from divine metal. Breaking into the celestial guest residence was not an easy task. Ling Han recuperated from his injuries calmly. He had a premonition that he had profited greatly from this great battle. After his injuries were recovered, whether it was battle prowess or cultivation level, they would both increase to a greater level. Time passed day after day, and new 8th Heaven Celestial Kings arrived. They discovered the signs of battle that were left behind, but they did not discover the presence of the celestial guest residence. They came and left soon after. A whole 3 years later, Ling Han had finally recovered from his injuries completely. Not bad. I am close to reaching the late stage of the 5th heaven. This kind of battle that forces out my potential completely is indeed the fastest method to improve my cultivation level, Ling Han murmured. Wife, let's go. We should go and retrieve the 3rd mystical power, Ling Han said to the Empress. The Empress nodded. The both of them stepped out of the celestial guest residence. As for bewitching Maiden Row, she continued to stay inside. There was no way for her to enter into the lava. Tong. The couple leaped into the lava. They had both spread out a protective layer of source power. If it was an extremely short amount of time, the source power shield would still be able to hold up. They arrived at the spot where ley lines converged, and studied it carefully. The Empress's defense was inferior to Ling Han's, and she had to come out of the lava once in a short while. Only when she recovered to her prime condition would she enter once more. Ling Han also shared his gains with the Empress. In this way, after about 3 years, they had finally confirmed all the details of the ley lines, and found the formation eye that was hidden within. Down! They dived further, but they had no plans on leaving immediately this time. They sat down where the formation eye was, and began to guide the power of the whole volcano so it would surge into their bodies. Boom! Fire and lightning wove together, surging madly towards them. However, this time this power did not hurt them. Instead, it circulated inside their bodies, turning into their own power. Crimson Flame Windy Lightning. They had obtained the 3rd secret technique. Extremely bright seals of great Tao flashed in their mind. Boom! The whole volcano was erupting. Lava gushed out, and crimson lightning dazzled the eyes. Some passed by, and discovered the unusual phenomena. However, they thought that this was a natural event. No matter how hard they thought, they could never have imagined that there were 2 people that were hiding here. Close to another 3,000 years passed like that. The lava of the volcano was no longer flowing. The lightning had also stopped because the power of regulation inside had already been exhausted. The crimson lava had coagulated and solidified, becoming red rocks, but they were still giving off steam. Pang! The rocks broke apart, and 2 human figures rushed out of them at practically the same time. It was Ling Han and the Empress. Ha ha ha! Ling Han turned and flopped onto the ground. He stretched out his right hand. Boom! Green, red, and black light blazed at the same time before fusing. Then, a streak of lightning intertwined, turning into a small sword, and then took the form of a saber, spear, and so on. Change happened as he willed it. Not only had Ling Han grasped the crimson flame windy lightning, he had fused the 3 secret techniques together, and their might was even stronger now. Before I obtain all the lightning of the 5 elements, this will be called the 3 lightning technique. I have already advanced to the middle stage of the 5th heaven. The Empress smiled. 4 celestial kings like them, there was nothing more pleasing than an increase in their cultivation level. Ling Han nodded. I am also just a step away from the peak stage. He was overjoyed as well. Once he advanced into the 6th heaven, he would be able to match a 9th heaven celestial king. That last battle against Zhang Tianyan was already so difficult, and this man only had the aptitude of an emperor tier. If it had been a monarch tier, even if I had had the aid of the divine demon sword, I still might not have been able to kill him. Previously, I had been too self-satisfied. However, even if I encounter a peak stage 8th heaven celestial king now, there is nothing for me to be afraid of. I am still short of 2 types of secret techniques. Both Ling Han and the Empress were filled with anticipation. After fusing the 3 secret techniques, they were even more aware of how strong this heavenly venerate technique was, and wanted even more to grasp the remaining 2 secret techniques to form the most complete, flawless heavenly venerate technique. The 2 of them advanced hand in hand. Though there was great danger within this ancient tomb, they were already unafraid. Their battle prowess was close to reaching the 9th heaven, so they indeed had that kind of confidence. Several days later, they arrived in front of a small lake. From afar, before they had even come close, they could already smell a refreshing fragrance. Celestial medicine. The 2 of them exchanged a look, and exclaimed at the same time. However, it was not just they who had discovered that there was a celestial medicine here. The lake was surrounded by people who were 6th heaven celestial kings at least, as they shone with streaks of peculiar light around them. Come, let's go and take a look. They strode forwards. Mere 5th heaven celestial kings actually dare to come here? A celestial king discovered the 2 of them, and involuntarily smirked coldly, looking extremely disdainful. However, the gaze he directed at the Empress was filled with a bit of heat. Do not underestimate them. It is impossible for ordinary 5th heaven celestial kings to come here. Their battle prowess has to reach the 6th heaven at least. Someone beside him remarked. In other words, monarch stars. The person from before immediately became serious. There were pitifully few monarch tiers, and monarch stars were even rarer. Even in the flaming frost realm that had gathered the prodigies of countless dimensions, there was definitely still a limited number of monarch stars. This kind of prodigy would be qualified to become a heavenly venerate. Thus, unless they had committed an act that was wicked beyond redemption, it was impossible that they would be imprisoned in the Celestial King graveyard. Their number really could be counted on the fingers of 2 hands. If one is not a ferocious dragon, better not cross the river one. We had best not stand out, everyone said. No one was willing to be the first to become an idiot to challenge Ling Han and the Empress. What if their strength was heaven-defyingly powerful? Ling Han and the Empress soared, standing in midair. In this way, their vision would not be obstructed. They could clearly see that there was a green duckweed growing in the center of the lake. Its leaves were as large as basins, and it had borne a pale golden fruit at this time. The fruit's fragrance wafted, spreading throughout the nearest 500 kilometers. This is greenish-black flowing ripple fruit. Ling Han looked stunned. Judging by how the fruit looks, it is already close to ripening. That could possibly happen any time in the next few years. The Empress looked towards him, and he nodded. It is celestial medicine of the highest grade. You and I can share it between us, and it would be enough to push us both to the 6th heaven. Then we must pluck it, the Empress said. A celestial king dressed in green couldn't help but say, "Haha, I say, the 2 of you are really speaking such big words." He looked to be an old man in his 60s, his skin tightly wrinkled. He did not look like a 6th heaven celestial king at all. Do the 2 of you know just how many elites are fighting over this celestial fruit? Lord Fu Jiming, Lord Sui Yuan, Lord He, and He. Ling Han was taken aback. He? Wasn't that Gu Hai then? They were here. Haha, this was really traveling far and wide to look for you, only to find you easily. Where is He? Ling Han asked. Naturally, he will only appear once the celestial fruit has ripened. By then, all the lords would begin a battle of the strongest, and only the victor will obtain the celestial fruit. That celestial king in green replied. As for us, we can only absorb some of the fragrance of the celestial fruit at that time, and who knows, there may be a chance that it would loosen the barrier to our cultivation levels. As for other delusions, there is no need to even think about it. Chapter 26:33. Pei Shenghai. Ling Han did not say anything else. Gu Haoyi would not be appearing for the moment, so Ling Han would just have to wait. Once the celestial fruit ripened, Gu Haoyi would definitely appear, and it would be fine to kill him then. Ling Han and the Empress sat down on the banks of the lake, absorbing the fruity fragrance. There was a sliver of energy from the heaven and earth contained within. It was extremely beneficial even for celestial kings. No wonder a great many people were still seated around here, even when they had full knowledge that they were not qualified to contend for the celestial fruit. The majority of celestial kings were affected by the black qi, all of them having hot tempers, and would fight over the slightest issue. Battles happened practically every day. Some battles would only cause severe injuries, while some would only end when one side died completely. The strongest people here were 23 peak stage 7th heaven celestial kings. They all had the aptitude of monarch tiers, and had battle prowess close to the 8th heaven celestial king tier. Thus, they had always been domineering, and held no reservations in their actions. At present, Ling Han only had two matters on his mind. The first was to wait for Gu Haoyi to appear, and the second was to pluck the celestial fruit. He was unconcerned about all else. Hence, he did not cause trouble, and merely waited patiently beside the Empress. However, while they would not cause trouble, it did not mean that others would not trifle with them, either, especially when the two of them were both only 5th heaven celestial kings, and the Empress was extraordinarily beautiful. This was practically a treasure that was completely unguarded. It was too tempting to others. After Ling Han showed his might and killed 9 6th heaven celestial kings in a row, finally no one dared to trifle with them any longer. This brat seems quite extraordinary. Ling Han's performance also drew the attention of those peak stage 7th heaven monarch tiers as they all turned their eyes on him. Little 7, go, have that brat come to greet me, a peak stage 7th heaven monarch tier declared. Understood. Ling Han sat with his head slightly raised, looking towards the celestial king that was approaching them. After he established his authority, no one dared to approach within 30 meters of him by now, yet this celestial king was just boldly walking towards the couple. Was he asking for a beating? Sir, my lord summons you, this celestial king said. He was a 6th heaven celestial king. Ling Han was nonchalant, and instead asked, who is your lord? Pei Shenghai, Lord Pei, that 6th heaven celestial king declared proudly. Pei Shenghai was a monarch tier whose battle prowess was close to the 8th heaven celestial king tier. Even in this place, he could be ranked among elites. Ling Han shook his head. I don't know this random person. You, that 6th heaven celestial king was instantly outraged. Ling Han actually dared say that Pei Shenghai was just some random person? The 6th heaven celestial king forcefully suppressed his anger, and said, if Lord Pei is just some random person, what are you then? Ling Han's eyes flashed with coldness. He was just sitting here. What trouble had he caused? Yet not only did the other party come uninvited, he was actually saying such big words. From the very moment he opened his mouth, it was a demand that Ling Han go to greet someone. What right did he have to expect a pleasant reception from Ling Han? You are seeking death, Ling Han said coldly. Raising his hand, he pressed down on the opponent. You dare, that 6th heaven celestial king called out harshly, yet did not dare to even counter. He hurriedly broke into a run and fled. He had seen Ling Han fight before. Ling Han's battle prowess was too frightening. How could he possibly dare to face him head-on? But if he had managed to flee, would Ling Han have been able to kill an 8th heaven celestial king? Pang! The palm strike descended, and that 6th heaven celestial king was smacked into a bloody mush. When the people around saw this, they all inhaled sharply. This guy was really too harsh, killing at the slightest provocation. The other guy had just asked him to pay his greetings to Pei Shenghai. Who was Pei Shenghai? A peak stage 7th heaven monarch tier, who definitely was qualified to put on such airs. You actually killed his subordinate at the slightest disagreement. This is a deep offense to Pei Shenghai. As they saw it, Ling Han was dead. Previously, The reason why he could be so arrogant and domineering was because those 7th Heaven Celestial Kings had not made a move on him. What more peak stage 7th Heaven Monarch tiers? Furthermore, Pei Shenghai is a close follower of Lord He. Someone revealed an even greater piece of information. What Lord He? Everyone was trembling. Though He was also a 7th Heaven Celestial King, his battle prowess could be comparable to peak stage 8th Heaven. Otherwise, he would not be qualified to contend for the celestial fruit. No wonder. So Pei Shenghai is one of the guards that Lord He has left here to watch over the celestial fruit. Lord He is really too extraordinary. He himself is only a 7th Heaven Celestial King as well, yet can make a 7th Heaven Celestial King Monarch tier follow him willingly. In the future, he will definitely be able to reign over a city and become an overlord in his own right. Even I wish to follow Lord He and ride on his coattails, but he doesn't even bother himself with me at all. Amidst a round of discussions, Pei Shenghai slowly stood, and then strode over to Ling Han, his expression icy cold. A puny 5th Heaven Celestial King actually dared not to give him face. Humph! He was not walking very fast, but with each step, a frightening aura reverberated like a sharp sword pointed straight at Ling Han. Ling Han actually dared to kill his subordinate right in front of him and in full public. Pei Shenghai was naturally enraged. He swore that he would definitely make Ling Han feel extreme regret for his insolence. How dare you? You actually dare to kill my subordinate? Pei Shenghai exclaimed coldly, his voice rumbling out like thunder, and causing the ears of the people around them to ring. Only an absolute blank left in their minds. This caused everyone great shock. This was the strength of a peak stage 7th Heaven Monarch tier. It was truly strength that could not be imagined. Ling Han was calm and indifferent, and replied, "Your subordinate provoked me, so I killed him. If you wish to follow in his footsteps, you can just come over then. I am not the type to like causing trouble, but if anyone causes trouble for me, just wait, and you will be crying soon." How dare you? Pei Shenghai shouted furiously. Wang. His voice turned into a wave that swept towards Ling Han like a tsunami. Xiao. Ling Han's figure flashed and pierced apart the sound wave like a sharp sword, rushing towards Pei Shenghai. You indeed have some strength. No wonder you dare to be so arrogant. Pei Shenghai smirked coldly. He raised a hand and pressed it down on Ling Han. But in front of me, this is far from enough. Ling Han suddenly sped up. Pang! Even a celestial king could not glimpse his movements. Everyone could only see a blur in their vision, and Ling Han had already appeared in front of Pei Shenghai. He raised his right fist and suddenly smashed it downwards. N? Pei Shenghai humphed lightly, stunned by how fast Ling Han was. However, he did not panic. Impressive speed did not mean that his battle prowess would also be strong. Pang! Ling Han's fist crashed down. Pei Shenghai raised his arm to parry. Great Tao entwined around his arm, as if there was a layer of divine light from an indestructible guardian deity protecting him. He was extremely confident in himself. Even an ordinary 8th Heaven Celestial King could not destroy his defense with a single strike. What more when it was only a puny 5th Heaven Celestial King? Pa! The fist landed, and that layer of divine light was practically like it didn't exist as it immediately shattered, and before Pei Shenghai's expression even changed, the power of the punch exploded, and his right arm was instantly broken. Flesh split apart, bones broke, and blood sprayed out. And this was not all of it. An unstoppable force surged out, and Pei Shenghai collapsed onto the ground. Pang! It created a loud boom as his whole person sank into the ground. This attack was earth-shattering. A 5th Heaven Celestial King actually defeated a peak stage 7th Heaven Monarch tier? This is too unbelievable. How could there be a monster like this? They are a couple, and have such incredible power. Could it be? Could it be? They are the outsiders who have come here to train? Everyone looked towards Ling Han and the Empress. There was shock in their expressions, as well as fear, but more than that, there was abhorrence. Ling Han was unconcerned, and merely seemed slightly surprised. You are actually still alive? Chapter 2634. Giving No Face. Pang! A figure shot out of the ground, standing proudly in midair. A blood-red aura was bubbling from all over his body, as if he was a great demonic god that was about to begin a massacre and kill every single being in this world. It was Pei Shenghai. Ling Han seemed slightly surprised. With a blow from him, a peak stage 7th Heaven King tier, even if he was a monarch tier, actually hadn't been killed. I have really underestimated you. Pei Shenghai's voice rumbled out like thunder. Cold light shot from his eyes. Seals of great Tao were visibly flickering. His killing intent blazed as his fury reached extreme levels. That's what I thought. How could Pei Shenghai possibly be insta-killed? When the people in the area saw this, they all nodded. This was the kind of supreme monarch tier that they had imagined. Pei Shenghai must have been underestimating his opponent too much. His strength is definitely not as low as this. Meanwhile, Ling Han stared at Pei Shenghai for a while, and gave an "oh." He said, "The body defense technique you cultivate is indeed extraordinary, allowing you to escape this calamity." When one had reached a height that Ling Han had, he naturally knew very well how much force he needed to use in his attacks. He would definitely not waste the slightest excess bit, but he had not expected that Pei Shenghai would have cultivated a very strong body defense technique, and that was why he had not succeeded fully. As if in response, Pei Shenghai immediately spat out a mouthful of blood. He had luckily escaped death, but it did not mean that he did not need to sacrifice anything for it. Seeing this scene, the people in the area were instantly extremely shocked. Correct. Ling Han had not killed Pei Shenghai with a single blow, but a single blow was enough to make the other party throw up blood. Was this not enough to express how strong he was? Heavens, his battle prowess would have to be at the 8th heaven at least, right? Even if it is the early stage of the 8th heaven, he has breached the gap of 3 cultivation levels. A 5th heaven. Yet he possesses the battle prowess of the 8th heaven. I'm about to go crazy. Everyone was grabbing their head as they exclaimed in shock. They could not believe this. They knew that there were indeed freaks in this world, but this was really too freakish. Freakish to a point that they could not accept. Pei Shenghai threw up blood like mad, but his vitality was actually soaring. His eyes shone with divine light, his fighting spirit blazing as he pointed a finger at Ling Han. You have successfully angered me, and death is the only path for you now. Ling Han laughed. Have you come to amuse me? Die. Pei Shenghai charged out. This time he was no longer careless, a silver spear appearing in his hands. Shwa! His speed was astonishing, and in a flash of silvery light, he instantly rushed right in front of Ling Han in the next moment. In this blow, Pei Shenghai had brought with him the great power of the heaven and earth. It was as if the heaven and earth were working together to suppress Ling Han. Monarch tiers were monarch tiers after all, so how could his strength be underestimated? And just when the silver spear was about to pierce its target, a spiritual attack was sent out towards Ling Han as well. Wang! Ling Han suddenly felt pain in his mind, as if his head was about to explode. Death spear! Pei Shenghai roared out, pouring all his power into the spear, and stabbing out at Ling Han. Under the spiritual attack, even if Ling Han's mind did not explode, he would definitely still be affected, which would cause his reaction speed to slow down. And in a battle of this level, a slight delay of one's reaction would become fatal. Die! Pei Shenghai smirked coldly. His eyes were weeping tears of blood, and his expression was extremely twisted. But in the next instant, the smile on his face suddenly turned into shock. That was because Ling Han moved calmly, and easily grabbed this spear. It really was just a short distance away, and the tip of the spear halted at Ling Han's throat. Pei Shenghai pushed forwards with all his might, but the spear seemed like it was rooted, and was completely motionless. How could this be? You clearly have not released any spiritual attack, so how could you not be affected? Pei Shenghai exclaimed in shock. Indeed, he could not believe this. Spiritual attacks could cancel each other out, but Ling Han had clearly not sent out any spiritual attack, so how could he be completely unaffected? Ling Han smiled slightly. Who said I was not affected? He had still been pained, but now that his tolerance had greatly increased, and with his incredibly strong willpower, he only experienced pain for a short while. His battle prowess would not be reduced because of this. This was called being affected. Pei Shenghai was speechless, But when he saw that Ling Han's other hand had already balled into a fist that was about to fly towards him, his heart turned cold. He hurriedly loosened his grip, and Xiao. He did his best to retreat as much as possible while exerting force through his feet. This opponent was too frightening, absolutely not someone Pei Shenghai could stand against. Now that you have attacked me, you still wish to retreat completely unscathed? Ling Han shook his head, his steps light. He seemed completely unhurried, but he was sticking closely to Pei Shenghai's tail. He had just not thrown a punch yet. Pei Shenghai's face had turned completely pale. What kind of monster was this? His power, speed, and spirit had all surpassed the level of fifth heaven, and even overwhelmed him completely. Yet Ling Han did not move all this while, and Pei Shenghai finally relaxed. He should be holding reservations because of Lord He, right? True, what kind of being is He? A peak stage 7th heaven supreme monarch star, whose evolution index has even soared to 12. Who would not be afraid of this kind of character? Lord He only needs to take one more step, and he will be able to do as he likes in the Celestial King graveyard. If he becomes a 9th heaven Celestial King, he will definitely become an absolutely invincible existence. Looks like you know what's good for you. Lord He. Pooh. Pei Shenghai was just about to say a few words to keep up appearances, yet had not anticipated that Ling Han would suddenly deliver a punch, crushing his head directly. His mind was instantly destroyed, so it was natural that he was completely dead. A series of sharp inhaling rang out in the area. This guy was really decisive and resolute. Pei Shenghai had already revealed his backer, but Ling Han had still moved without hesitation, not giving face to even He. He is an absolutely extraordinary character. This guy is indeed extraordinary, but a 5th heaven actually wants to match a peak stage 7th heaven supreme monarch star? No matter what, that cannot be possible. That's right. Even if this guy's evolution index has reached 12, there is no way to compensate for the gap of 2 cultivation levels. He'll just be waiting for Lord He's fury to tear him into pieces. Everyone was not optimistic about Ling Han, and shook their head. Even those peak stage 7th heaven elites did not step out and say anything. In any case, once He was here, Ling Han would simply become a dead body. But how could they have known that not only had Ling Han's evolution index reached 12, he had also obtained an invincible body art? This was the true basis for his confidence. Ling Han returned to his original spot and sat down, waiting patiently for the celestial fruit to ripen. He was determined to obtain this celestial fruit. He only needed 1/5 or even 1/10, and he would have the confidence to attempt breaking through to the 6th heaven, and after he crossed this threshold, it would be no issue for him to match a 9th heaven celestial king when he channeled both his body art and power of regulation at the same time. He should only need 5 years at most, or so he secretly estimated. Even Pei Shenghai had practically been insta-killed, so it was naturally impossible that there would be anyone else that would go and provoke Ling Han again or covet the Empress. Even if they did, they could only keep their thoughts to themselves. Time passed quietly, and Gu Hai did not appear. It seemed like he would not appear before the celestial fruit ripened. Ling Han was unconcerned as well. At present, his only priority was the celestial fruit. He only had to ascend to the 6th heaven, and no matter who his opponent was, he would be able to suppress them. And in this manner, 4 years passed. On this day, the fragrance emanating from the celestial fruit became extremely strong, causing everyone's pores to expand and dilate, and making them feel as if they were floating on air. A supremely valuable celestial fruit, a supreme great herb. Ha ha ha. Following a loud laugh, a figure in green streaked forwards from the distance. At first, he was still a boundless distance away, but in the blink of an eye, he instantly appeared at the side of the lake. Everyone was filled with reverence because this old man in green was enshrouded in 8 ribbons of iridescent light. The celestial fruit was close to ripening, and the powerful figures had finally appeared. Chapter 2635. Deliberately come to kill you. I, Fu Yunhai, will accept this greenish-black flowing ripple fruit. The celestial king in green laughed loudly, directly stretching out his hand to snatch the celestial fruit from the center of the lake. Brother Fu, you are too greedy. A voice rang out, but a golden light had already shot over, heading towards Fu Yunhai. Boom! This large hand was immediately ripped apart, but the golden light was erased as well. Xiao? Fu Yunhai asked coldly, looking in a specific direction. Xiao. With a flash of golden light, another eighth heaven celestial king appeared. He was only 3 feet tall, and was a dwarf, but no one dared to underestimate him. His vitality was bubbling like multiple furious dragons. It was probable that any of these dragons was capable of casually suppressing any 6th heaven celestial king. This dwarf was Xiao. He cast an eye on the surroundings, and then cackled. Diao Yu, Xueqi, Rongwen Lin, what are you all cowering for? Could it be that you people want to sit on the sidelines and take advantage of us? As his words fell, 3 figures immediately shot over. They were all 8th heaven celestial kings, and their aura was shocking. They were all 8th heaven celestial kings, only a single step away from the pinnacle of the celestial king tier. But the last person was slowly walking here from the horizon. His hands were crossed behind his back. Every step was extremely elegant, but no matter how one looked at it, he exuded the air of a show-off. 7 ribbons of iridescent light wrapped around him, proving that he was only a 7th heaven celestial king, yet he was capable of standing equal to 8th heaven celestial kings, so he was indeed qualified to show off. No Guhai. Ling Han's eyes narrowed. He stood up. Guhai, Yingxiong, and Miao Hua were the 3 people that he wanted to kill the most at present. Since we are all gathered now, let us decide whom the greenish-black flowing ripple fruit belongs to now, Xiao said. Since there are 6 of us, each of us will claim a 6th. How about it? No. Guhai shook his head. I want half. You. Xiao and the others all glared. This guy was demanding half from the get-go. Then didn't that mean that they could only each claim a 10th? You have all reached the peak stage of the 8th heaven. A 10th of the celestial fruit would be enough to help you to break through to the 9th heaven, Guhai stated calmly. He was the one at peak stage 7th heaven. To say nothing of only 1 greenish-black flowing ripple fruit, even if there were 10, he would not be complaining that there were too many. Humph, what if we fail on our first attempt? Diao Yu asked coldly. Then I want half myself. You're not worthy. Guhai glanced at him, and then treated him with complete disdain. How dare you? Diao Yu glared furiously at Guhai. What about it? Do you want to die? Guhai scoffed. We all know that you are very strong and freakish, but there are 5 peak stage 8th heaven celestial kings here. Xiao said, his gaze flashing. It was unknown what he was thinking about. Guhai laughed loudly. For trash like you, even if 3 of you join forces, you would still not be a match for me. But there are 5 of us. Xueqi replied, but it was a tacit admission of how strong Guhai was. Guhai did not speak, but rather drew a sword directly. Immediately, its cold light dazzled the heavens, so blinding it was a blur. Celestial tool. The expressions of Xiao and the others immediately became bitter. Merely Guhai alone was capable of matching 3 peak stage 8th heaven celestial kings, and if there was a celestial tool thrown into the equation, he would not lose even if it was just him against 5 of them. Fine. You win. If you want half, then half it is. Xiao and the others all conceded. If it really came down to a battle, perhaps they could win, but it would definitely be a narrow victory. Furthermore, if they were struck by the celestial tool, they could not bear to imagine the consequences. Guhai was calm and nonchalant. Though he had forced 5 great 8th heaven celestial kings to submit to his will, he did not show a sliver of conceit. That was because this could not be any more normal in his eyes. He was a man that would become a heavenly venerate in the future, so what was the simple matter of forcing several 8th heaven celestial kings to submit worth? As expected of Lord He is truly mighty. Himself being a 7th heaven celestial king, he can manage to force 5 great 8th heaven celestial kings to submit to him. This is definitely something that would be known for generations. Everyone was extremely excited. Their blood bubbled hotly at this scene, each person looking at Guhai like an idol. The 6 great 8th heaven celestial kings all descended towards the center of the lake. Since the decision was made, it was now time for retrieval. Shua! Right at this moment, a sword light swept past, so brilliant and blinding that everyone couldn't help but close their eyes. However, they immediately snapped open their eyes in fear. This was Sword Light. Wasn't closing their eyes just committing suicide? Sword Light swept past, yet Gu Haoyi and company were forced to rise. They did not dare to continue descending on the center of the lake. A man with sword in hand stood on the banks of the lake, his black robes fluttering, as dashingly elegant as a deity. It was none other than Ling Han. Has this guy gone mad? Lord He has not called him out for an accounting yet he actually dares to step out of his own volition? Furthermore, he has attacked 6 great elites all at the same time. Does he think that he is Lord He? Everyone felt this was unbelievable. They could no longer understand this world. The 6 great elites all turned to look at Ling Han at the same time, and when they saw that Ling Han was only a 5th heaven celestial king, they all looked surprised. This was too much of an exaggeration, wasn't it? Had he developed the courage of an immortal dragon? Yet Gu Haoyi laughed loudly. So it is you. I have deliberately come here to kill you. Ling Han stated indifferently. Should I call you Zhang San or Li Si? Gu Haoyi asked, unconcerned. Though Ling Han was more freakish than the former was, the latter had been scrambling around like a rat under the hot pursuit of Gu Haoyi, Yingxiong, and the other guy. How could Gu Haoyi take him to heart now? My name is Ling Han. Ling Han answered. No matter what your name is, since I have seen you, you are dying without a doubt today. Gu Haoyi's expression was completely disdainful, but when he said the last few words, he revealed an intense killing intent. This man was more freakish than Gu Haoyi was, so he had to be hiding a great secret. Gu Haoyi would kill him and take this secret for himself. However, I do not have the time to deal with you now, so just wait here for now. Gu Haoyi stretched out his hand and grabbed, and the heaven and earth manifested. He actually manifested a human figure. He then instilled a sliver of his divine sense within, and that figure made of regulations immediately filled up and became realistic. The human figure charged towards Ling Han. Boom! It was emitting an incredibly strong aura, and even an ordinary 7th heaven celestial king would feel fear at seeing it. Heavens, Lord He is actually as strong as this. Simply drawing on regulations casually, inserting a sliver of his spirit, and it would possess battle prowess that could overwhelm a 7th heaven. The greatest prodigy! The greatest prodigy! Everyone was numb with shock. Even Yingxiong and company were extremely wary. This young man was really too frightening. If he broke through to the 8th heaven, then the 5 of them added together wouldn't even be a match for him single-handedly, right? Why had that young man called Ling Han sought his own death? The strength of the 2 of them was not even on the same level, and now Gu Haoyi had to retrieve the celestial fruit first. Once he was free, eliminating Ling Han would only be a thought for him. Shua, a sword light swept out, and that figure of regulations was already slashed in 2. Swaying and trembling, it wanted to put itself back together again, but with the rush of destructive power, it immediately turned into countless pieces. An existence that was capable of suppressing a 7th heaven celestial king had actually been eliminated with a single strike. Heavens! Everyone was grabbing their head, exclaiming in shock. They were completely incapable of believing their own eyes. Ling Han sheathed his sword and stated evenly, I already said it. I have deliberately come to kill you. Chapter 2636. Fighting for the Celestial Fruit. Previously, Gu Haoyi had come slowly, and everyone thought that he was a show-off. However, compared with Ling Han now, his showiness was practically nothing. Everyone looked at Ling Han, their eyes filled with confusion and respect. Of course, there was also contempt. After all, most people had already guessed that Ling Han and the Empress were both outsiders who had come here to train. How could a 5th heaven celestial king be as strong as this? Gu Haoyi also showed a hint of seriousness. Though that figure of regulations had only been something he had formed casually, it genuinely had the battle prowess of the peak stage of the 7th heaven, yet Ling Han destroyed it with a single strike. But he immediately looked disdainful. You are just depending on the might of your celestial tool. Yingxiong and the other great 8th heaven celestial kings did not speak. Exchanging a look, they communicated secretly with their gazes. Once the 2 started fighting, the rest would snatch the celestial fruit. In that way, every single one of them could claim a 5th, which was double the amount that had previously been agreed upon. Ling Han walked forwards, rising into the air with every step, and standing level with the 6 great elites. Previously, even if everyone knew that he was very freakish, they would definitely not think that he could stand equal to Gu Hai, Xueqi, and the other elites, but nobody thought that way any longer now. This was the 7th big shot. Are you determined to seek death now? Gu Hai asked coldly. He was too displeased. The celestial fruit was right in front of his eyes, and obtaining it would send him right into the 8th heaven. For other celestial kings, this celestial fruit would only increase their cultivation level, at most, but would not be of much help in opening the great doors to the next cultivation level. However, it was different for him. He was a supreme monarch star, and the barrier to the next cultivation level could be claimed to be non-existent for him. I am just going to kill you. Ling Han's eyes were cold. If he asked himself honestly, he had never offended Gu Hai and company, but they had pursued him all the way into the Celestial King graveyard. Did they really think that he was an easy target to bully? Shameless boasting. Gu Hai retorted coldly, and suddenly threw a punch right at Ling Han. Wang. Regulations condensed, turning into a giant hand in green that descended from the skies, smacking down on Ling Han. Ling Han's left hand balled into a fist, and fired at the skies. Pang! Space trembled, and that giant green hand was instantly shattered. Not so impressive, Ling Han said. Seeing this, everyone couldn't help but feel excited. Ling Han was indeed not inferior to Gu Hai. Heavens, that was only a mere 5th heaven celestial king. This was mad. This was absolutely mad. This had completely broken the iron rules of cultivation. A 5th heaven celestial king actually possessed battle prowess at the 8th heaven. No, at the peak stage of the 8th heaven celestial king tier. Couldn't he let others live? Letting you live for a few more days was truly a mistake. Gu Hai charged out. Previously, Ling Han had not been a match for him, and could only be severely injured when they clashed, fleeing in a panic. But Gu Hai had not found and killed Ling Han, which allowed the latter to break through to the 5th heaven, and gain the ability to pose a threat to the former. Haha, could it be that I have to thank you all for your kindness then? Ling Han scoffed. If it were not for the fact that he had a strong willpower and extraordinary strength, he would have long since been killed by Gu Hai and the company. It won't be too late to kill you now either. Gu Hai charged over, his divine sword already drawn without hesitation. He did not dare to underestimate Ling Han in the slightest. I'll return these words to you, shameless boasting, and I will add another few words, in your dreams. Ling Han also approached with the divine demon sword in hand. Ding! The two celestial tools clashed, and boundless ripples of murderous aura swept out with a boom, surging in all directions. Even 8th heaven celestial kings would be wary of this, and they all dodged. Ding ding ding. Pang pang pang. Two great elites, prodigies, freaks were exchanging blows endlessly, putting their strength on full display. They are actually equal. Everyone was stunned. Previously, Gu Hai had used bloodshed to prove his strength, and won the status of an elite, and now Ling Han was doing the same. He was using Gu Hai as a stepping stone, and becoming famous with a single battle. No no no. At present, it is only a contest of standard battle prowess. Neither of them have used any ultimate moves, so it is not definite who is stronger yet. I think it should be Lord He. After all, he has the advantage of cultivation level. I think it should be that Ling Han since he dares to take the initiative to issue a challenge. How could he possibly have dared to step out if he had not had absolute confidence? I support Lord He. I support Ling Han. The two great prodigies were fighting madly, and the 5 8th heaven celestial kings were all smirking coldly. Their eyes turned on that greenish-black flowing ripple fruit that was below them. This was the time. They all moved, descending onto the surface of the lake. They wanted to snatch the celestial fruit. Shwa! Shwa! Two streaks of sword chi descended from the skies, slicing down towards them. These two flashes of sword chi had not been both delivered by the same person, but their might was chilling, and Yingxiong and the others had no choice but to dodge. Otherwise, it was possible that even they would be killed. That was because the attacks had been delivered by celestial tools. Ling Han, Gu Hai. It was one matter for them to be fighting, but how could they possibly allow others to take advantage of their preoccupation? Thus, the moment Yingxiong and the others moved, The duo moved without any prior agreement, assaulting the 5 great 8th heaven celestial kings. Damn it! Xueqi and the others were all cursing lowly. These 2 juniors were really too harsh. They were fighting, yet they were actually still guarding against them. Never mind. That's right. Since we have already offended them, what else should we be concerned about? The 5 of them pounced towards the celestial fruit. If they could use the celestial fruit to advance to the 9th heaven, then whether it was He or Ling Han, they could suppress the 2 of them with one hand behind their backs. Ling Han roared, throwing off Xueqi, and bulldozed forwards with sword in hand. In comparison, it was definitely the greenish-black flowing ripple fruit that was more important. There was only one celestial fruit, and it would be gone if it fell into the hands of another. Xueqi, though, could be killed at a later time. Xueqi had the same idea. Brandishing his divine sword, he pounced directly towards the celestial fruit. He would take the celestial fruit first, and then kill Ling Han. In your dreams, Ling Han sneered coldly. Hi's sword swept out, directing a strike at Xueqi. Die! Instantly, the whole area was in complete chaos. 7 great elites were all fighting one another at one moment, and they would be dashing towards the celestial fruit in the next, but that would then result in being ganged up on by the other 6 elites. It was fine if they did not make a move towards the celestial fruit. Whoever did would become the public enemy. Both Ling Han and Xueqi had extraordinary strength, but in a situation when everyone else was their enemy, there was definitely no way that they could hold up while being ganged up on by 5 great 8th heaven elites. It was that case for them. What more for Xueqi and the others? The 7 of them were fighting an extremely intense battle, but it was a stalemate. None of them could become the first to break through. Wang wang wang. Multiple spiritual attacks were also being used. Everyone wanted to send the others into a dizzy state, and use that opportunity to pluck the celestial fruit, but 6 out of the 7 of them had grasped this kind of powerful move. It was definitely not anyone that could suppress all those around him. Fight, fight, fight. Fighting until even the skies darkened, fighting till ghosts wailed and gods howled. The spectators were not even worthy of watching the battle among 7th heaven celestial kings at close quarters. They had no choice but to retreat further and further. 1 day, 2 days, 3 days. Time was passing by slowly, and the battle among the 7 great elites still did not have a result. Ling Han was fuming. He had no wish to just continue the battle endlessly like this. Releasing a battle cry, he channeled the indestructible heaven scroll. Multiple golden seals appeared on his body, pushing his defense level to an unbelievable level. Die! Ling Han rushed towards the celestial fruit, and this instantly attracted the fury of the 6 great elites. They all rained a mad barrage of attacks on him. Too bad, Ling Han was practically indestructible at this moment. He could withstand even a few blows from a 9th heaven celestial king. Pang pang pang. Countless attacks exploded on him, but Ling Han's speed became even faster in his charge. He stretched out a hand and grabbed at the celestial fruit. Chapter 26:37. Big Trouble. You dare! The 6 including Xueqi all shouted. Their attacks came on like a tsunami, with spiritual attacks being launched in waves. Ling Han groaned. The indestructible heaven scroll was focused more on protecting his physical body, while protection of the spirit was weaker, so he couldn't help but spit out a mouthful of blood as he stumbled. But his eyes glittered with a firm resolve, and he grabbed the celestial fruit without flinching. Die! Xueqi slashed out with his sword, and sword chi moved unhindered in all directions. It was terrifying indeed. This was a celestial tool. Pooh! Blood spurted from Ling Han's back, but he still couldn't be stopped in his tracks. With a move of his left hand, he seized the celestial fruit. Ah! All the 6 powerful elites became furious immediately. This was a treasure that they were determined to obtain, and which they have been waiting for a long time. Ling Han had thoroughly ignited their anger. Boom! The attacks came out one after another, all targeting Ling Han. Originally, Ling Han had been able to circulate the indestructible heaven scroll for about an hour, but under the combined attacks of so many elites, the seals on his body had begun to flicker. Fortunately, he finally didn't have to keep on withstanding the attacks. Xiao. He activated the regulations of space, and he was already by the Empress' side in one step. He reached out and grabbed her before sending her into the celestial guest residence. He further threw in the celestial fruit, and sent a message via divine sense to the Empress. Then, he laughed out loud and turned around, facing the 6 powerful elites who were boiling with anger. Hand over the celestial fruit, then I can spare you, Yingxiong said. I only need 1/10, as long as that is handed over to me. I can leave here immediately. Xiao relented slightly. I also need only 1/10, then I will leave immediately, Rong Wenlin said. One by one, the 6 powerful elites expressed their stand except for Gu Haoyi. Everyone only wanted 1/10 of the celestial fruit. This was the same as their previous agreement with Gu Haoyi, and was also the bottom line which they could accept. As for how Ling Han and Gu Haoyi distributed the remainder of the celestial fruit among themselves, it would be none of their business. Haha, you guys are thinking too much, Ling Han said lightly. If you get out of here now, I can still spare all of you. Otherwise, don't bother about leaving, your life will end here. What a lunatic! Utterly insane! Attack together! The 6 powerful elites were all provoked, each launching powerful attacks, and aiming them at Ling Han. Ling Han mainly focused on dodging the attacks. The divine demon sword was invincible, and defended incomparably tenaciously under the siege of the powerful elites. Had it not been that the spiritual attacks were overwhelmingly terrifying, Ling Han could even have defended without sustaining any injury. It was impossible to run away. The 6 powerful elites had already encircled him and utilized their great abilities to restrict the surrounding space. It might have been impossible for one person to do it, but under the joint efforts of the 6 powerful elites, it wasn't difficult to do so. Besides, Ling Han didn't plan to escape. Fight, fight, fight. Ling Han slashed with the divine demon sword in his right hand, while his left hand used the 3 lightning technique, aided by the 9 transformations divine scroll. The power of his attacks was extremely violent. In terms of defense, the indestructible heaven scroll was a force to be reckoned with, helping him out of danger time and time again. One person battled against the 6 powerful elites. Everyone was stunned. They had already looked very highly upon Ling Han, but then they had come to the realization that they had still underestimated this person was unreasonably heaven-defying indeed. He can't hold on for long, there's bound to be mistakes, and that will be his death. Gu Haoyi said coldly, his resolve firm and unshakable. Agreed. The other 5 including Yingxiong agreed with him, and stepped up their attacks. 1 day, 10 days, and then 1 month had passed, and the battle was still ongoing. They were all truly infuriated by now, determined to kill Ling Han. Ling Han's body was riddled with injuries. After all, he was going against 6 people with battle prowess of the 8th heaven. Coupled with such terrifying spiritual attacks, it was already extraordinary to be able to withstand them, so how could he not be injured? But Ling Han was getting stronger and stronger despite his wounds. Accompanied by his battle cry, his fighting spirit was strong like iron, and his counterattacks were fierce. The divine demon sword swirled with brilliant radiance, unleashing sword chi all around. 3 months, and then half a year passed. Ling Han paused for a moment, and suddenly began trying to break out of the encirclement aggressively. Don't even think about it. The 6 powerful elites sneered. They had confined the space. If Ling Han wanted to break free, he would need at least 10 breaths time, which was enough time for them to catch up and kill him. Ling Han swiped out with a hand, and a beautiful figure with a strong and unstable aura emanating from her body emerged. It was the Empress. As soon as she waved her hand, Xiao, Ling Han immediately flew towards her. His body shrank rapidly before he completely disappeared. He entered the celestial guest residence. Damn it! The 6 powerful elites roared. Call him out or else die. They were all extremely resolute, even Gu Haoyi, who also expressed his admiration for the Empress. Ling Han had to die, otherwise there would be endless troubles. The Empress couldn't even be bothered to give them any regard, and didn't bother to answer at all. Take her down. The 6 powerful elites all wanted to make a move as they couldn't give Ling Han a chance to heal. This kind of person was too terrifying. Once he was allowed to recover, his battle prowess might even reach a greater level than before. The Empress smiled, so elegant and gorgeous that heaven and earth paled in comparison. However, dark clouds rolled out, and a terrifying oppressive might materialized. Heavenly tribulation. It was the coming of heavenly tribulation. The Empress had already refined a portion of the greenish-black flowing ripple fruit in the celestial guest residence, which made her cultivation level progress greatly. With the time acceleration effects, she had reached the peak stage of the fifth heaven, and was the first to be qualified to charge towards the sixth heaven. With the appearance of heavenly tribulation, who would still dare to take action? Interfering with other people's tribulation was one of the great disrespects to heaven and earth, and entailed extremely serious consequences. The 6 powerful celestial kings stopped at the same time. If they made another move, they would be bringing calamity upon themselves. Gu Hui's gaze flickered. He was a supreme monarch star. In a certain sense, he wasn't afraid of heavenly tribulation. However, the Empress was the object of his admiration. If it wasn't absolutely necessary, he really didn't want to meet her in battle. But after hesitating for a moment, he strengthened his resolve. Ling Han had probably gone to refine the celestial fruit, and if he started to charge towards the sixth heaven, then it would be all over for them. Under this premise, so what if it was the Empress? Die! Gu Hui brandished his sword. Even if the heavenly tribulation were to strike, he still attacked the Empress. How dare you! The Empress snorted coldly. Her arms waved, and 2 divine swords appeared in her hands at the same time. Ling Han had given her the divine demon sword when he entered the celestial guest residence. Gu Hui couldn't help but be startled. 2 celestial tools. Everyone was also stunned. 2 celestial tools. Shua, the Empress did not hesitate for a bit, slashing with both swords, and sword chi shot upwards into the sky. The combination of 2 divine swords was too extraordinary. In addition, the Empress was about to break through to the sixth heaven. Her own battle prowess was comparable to the late stage or even the peak stage of the seventh heaven, and she was capable enough to deliver eighth heaven level power with a celestial tool. If it was just Gu Hui alone, the Empress could block him. Gu Hui roared. Perhaps Ling Han might have already refined the celestial fruit at this time. Although he could still refine Ling Han himself to extract the essence, this would be a terrible feeling as he was not a man-eating demon, after all. He had to suppress the Empress as soon as possible, pull out Ling Han, and kill him. Otherwise, with every bit of time that passed, Ling Han would have refined an additional bit of essence of the celestial fruit. The Empress wasn't fearful at all. Although Gu Hui's battle prowess was higher than hers, he would have to go through a tribulation of the seventh heaven celestial king tier, so how much energy could he spare to attack her? At least within this day, she could still hold her ground steadily. However, when the heavenly tribulation dissipated, the 5 powerful elites of 8th heaven would join the siege, and it would be really troublesome by then. Chapter 2638. A Desperate Battle. The Empress was battling Gu Hui, but she wasn't at any disadvantage at all. Certainly, with the heavenly tribulation, which was the absolute main force of the offensive, added in, it caused the 2 prodigies to split and move in different directions, dodging constantly. Celestial Maiden Luan Xing, why are you obsessed with that kid? Gu Hui said. Seeing that he could not win against the Empress, he changed his strategy, and attempted to break up the 2. He is not worthy of you at all. Her Majesty didn't say a word, but responded by slashing her dual swords at greater speed. I will love you 100 times more than that brat. Gu Hui said. Disgusting, the Empress reprimanded coldly. Gu Hui took a deep breath, and no longer had any delusions about the Empress. Even if he wanted to possess the Empress, he would directly suppress her with brute force and seize her body. You forced me to do this, he muttered, and the celestial tool in his hand slashed forward with boundless radiance. 10 demon soul-capturing sword. He released a great attack with the sword blazing brilliantly, and slashing through the air a soul-draining and fatal strike. Wang, a spiritual attack was launched at the same time, charging towards the Empress. The Empress was in great danger. It went without saying that a heavenly tribulation was a terrifying entity, and she was being attacked aggressively by a supreme monarch star who was at the peak of 7th heaven with a powerful attack at the same time, which naturally put a lot of pressure on her. This was a disadvantage of several cultivation levels. It was just too wide a gap. The Empress was fighting and retreating at the same time. Currently, the heavenly tribulation was wreaking havoc, And thus the blockade previously laid out by the 6 powerful elites was nothing more than an empty shell. In a sense, this had transcended regulations. Gu Haoyi kept pressing on closely as he didn't have much time left. If he couldn't suppress the Empress soon enough, then when he dragged Ling Han out, the other party would have almost completely refined the celestial fruit. He wanted to break through to the 8th heaven. He designedly had to do so as soon as possible, for only then would he be capable of contending with 9th heaven celestial kings. Gu Haoyi's attacks were getting more and more aggressive, but the Empress was defending just as tenaciously. Most importantly, he could only utilize part of his power for attacking, or the heavenly tribulation would unmistakably strike him, not bothering one bit if he was a monarch star or whatever else. The Empress defended tenaciously. Soon, a day had passed, and the heavenly tribulation had dissipated. The group of 5 including Fu Yunhai simultaneously attacked the Empress. These were actually people with battle prowess at the 8th heaven. Even if the Empress had broken through to the 6th heaven, and was aided by 2 celestial tools, she was still not their match. She was immediately beaten to the point of vomiting blood. The Empress couldn't even hold her ground for 10 strikes. She had no choice but to retreat into the celestial guest residence. Otherwise, she would be seeking death. This was too obvious, so the 6 powerful elites were all eyeing the celestial guest residence at the same time. It might be boosted with the heaven-deceiving technique, but that was useless at this point in time. Spatial God tool? Xueqi said disdainfully, sending a punch towards it. Wang, divine metal shone brightly, sending out a terrifying wave of power which rebounded back towards Xueqi. Xueqi's expression changed drastically, and he swiftly jumped out of the way to let the wave of power pass through. Divine metal would not launch an attack on its own accord, but when attacked, it could rebound the strike. This would be terrifying because once the attack was compounded with the destructive power of divine metal itself, it wasn't something one could withstand unless one's battle prowess was at the level of the 9th heaven. A spatial god tool made of divine metal. Seeing this, the group of powerful elites exclaimed in surprise. It was too extravagant indeed. Other people didn't even have one celestial tool, whilst here they were, already forging a spatial celestial tool with divine metal. So what? Gu Haoyi sneered. This celestial tool was merely something they had forged themselves, and doesn't even have the formation patterns laid out by a great 9th heaven celestial king tier. It shouldn't be difficult to crack. That's right. Yingxiong and the others nodded in unison. Come, let's join forces to crack it. The 6 powerful elites joined forces to strike again, but this time the attack was targeting neither Ling Han nor the Empress, but rather the celestial guest residence. They were all really greedy. This was actually an item made of divine metal. Even if they seized it and did not choose to reforge it as a weapon, it was already very impressive solely based on the fact that it was a spatial celestial tool. If there were exceptional formation patterns on it, then they wouldn't need to fear even 9th heaven celestial kings. These were the formation patterns laid by Ling Han with his cultivation level of the 5th heaven. Hence, they weren't difficult to crack. After only half a day, the 6 powerful elites sneered. Success! Ling Han died. From the moment they entered, they saw a blur in their vision as a human figure shot out towards them. Ling Han. The group of 5 including Yingxiong took a few steps back. They were too fearful of Ling Han. Moreover, they were even more fearful that Ling Han had already refined the celestial fruit, and had brought his strength to a higher level. There's no need to be afraid, it's impossible for him to refine the celestial fruit in just a day and a half, Gu Haoyi said immediately, taking the lead in launching an attack. Ling Han's right hand waved, and the divine demon's sword was drawn. Ding, ding, ding. The 2 prodigies were once again engaged in a fierce battle. Indeed, it was as Gu Haoyi had said. Even if Ling Han had a physique of time, a mere 1.5 days' time was insufficient for him to refine the celestial fruit, raise his cultivation level to the peak stage of the 5th heaven, and break through to the 6th heaven. However, Ling Han had no choice but to come out, as the formations of celestial guest residence had been broken through, and soon the enemy would be closing in on them rapidly. At that time, he would not only be forced into a fierce battle, but also put all the women in danger. Seeing that Ling Han's strength hadn't improved much, the group of 5 including Yingxiong breathed a sigh of relief, and then launched their attacks consecutively. Ling Han kept fighting. Even if he hadn't broken through to the 6th heaven yet, his battle prowess was still higher than that of the Empress. Striking with fists and sword, he began to break free of their encirclement. The blockade surrounding them had already been destroyed by heavenly tribulation. Don't even think about it. The five, including Xueqi, immediately leaped aside one after the other to set up a new confinement around them. Ling Han smiled coldly. If all of you insist on courting death, then I will fulfill your wish. Your death is imminent. Gu Haoyi kept on badgering Ling Han, preventing him from having a chance to escape, while the other five, including Xueqi, set up the restrictions. Thereafter, they joined forces with Gu Haoyi to kill Ling Han. This brat has got such soaring levels of vitality. His body is a treasure in itself. Perhaps I can directly break through to the ninth heaven if I refine him. Xiao Yu said as his eyes swept over Ling Han's body without any scruples. What he meant was that he would refine Ling Han alive into an alchemical pill, which he would then ingest. That's right, with such amazing body art, the physical body is indeed a treasured medicine. Rong Wenlin nodded, licking his lips with his tongue. At their level, they only had eyes for striving towards the ninth heaven. Under this premise, they could disregard all principles and human ethics. Kill. The attacks of these celestial kings were even more violent. They knew that it was already impossible to get their hands on the greenish-black flowing ripple fruit, but if Ling Han was to be refined into medicine, the effect would be the same, or perhaps even better. Kill, kill, kill. They fixed their eyes on Ling Han. If this went on, they would eventually kill him. Yet Ling Han actually kept silent, which was uncharacteristic of him. He just continued to attack with his sword without saying a word. It's just stubborn resistance. Gu Hai sneered. Although he had yet to see the dawn of victory and wouldn't anytime soon, he believed that it wouldn't take long for this day to come. Whether it was 10 days, a month, or even half a year or a century, Gu Hai would persevere until he killed Ling Han with his own hands. Time was passing by quickly, and Ling Han's situation was getting worse and worse. The combined power of the 6 powerful elites was really too terrifying. Furthermore, each one of them knew how to launch spiritual attacks, causing Ling Han to be riddled with injuries, and the indestructible true fluid was no longer sufficient to heal his wounds. His injuries were so severe that his battle prowess had plummeted to rock bottom. Try a little harder, he won't be able to hold on any longer. Fu Yunhai exclaimed. Kill! The 6 powerful elites all had bloodshot eyes. At this moment, Ling Han's body suddenly erupted with an incomparably powerful aura, as if a tsunami, which caused the 6 powerful elites to shudder uncontrollably. Chapter 2639. Arrival of Heavenly Tribulation. Fu Yunhai's expression changed drastically as he exclaimed. Not good. He's about to advance. How is that possible? We've put him under so much pressure, yet he still has the spare energy to advance? Xueqi's eyes were about to pop out of their sockets. What should we do? Rong Wenlin asked as he sucked in a sharp breath. Ling Han was already so ferocious at this moment, so once he advanced to the 6th heaven, his battle prowess would naturally soar to a new height. Gu Hai hadn't imagined that Ling Han would be so courageous, either. While being attacked by 6 elites, he unexpectedly decided to set aside some energy to advance. This was truly a gamble with his life on the line. Regardless of if he made a mistake while advancing, causing him to lose his mind, or he were struck by them, both would cause him to be severely wounded. However, Ling Han had still decided to advance anyway. Moreover, he had succeeded. However, Gu Hai immediately regained his composure, saying, "It doesn't matter. Even if he advances to the 6th heaven, his battle prowess will only double at most. We're still powerful enough to suppress him." After breaking through, the cultivation of celestial kings would become unstable for a period of time. Thus, even though their battle prowess would increase significantly, it would only be double their original battle prowess at most. What was the greatest significance of advancing? It was in order to unlock the path for further cultivation, allowing one to further raise their strength. Otherwise, one would be trapped in the same spot. Xueqi and the others pondered for a moment before nodding in agreement. Their battle prowess was more than double that of Ling Han, so even if he advanced to the 6th heaven, they would still be able to maintain their advantage as long as his battle prowess didn't reach the 9th heaven. Thunderclouds rumbled overhead. It was clear that Ling Han's 6th heaven heavenly tribulation was far more powerful than that of the Empress, and this was because he had mastered a fearsome body art as well. Moreover, This body art was above the regulations. Crack! A bolt of lightning smashed down, carrying with it a magnificent power of destruction. Gu Haoyi and the others hurriedly retreated. No matter how powerful they were, they still didn't dare to challenge the heavens head-on. Even Gu Haoyi could only retreat at this moment. He dared to face the Empress Tribulation, but he didn't dare to face Ling Han's. After all, that would be seeking death. On the ground, everyone was wide-eyed with astonishment. They hadn't expected such a huge turn in the situation. Ling Han was already on the verge of collapsing, yet he suddenly summoned a tribulation, attempting to advance to the sixth heaven. If he succeeded, his battle prowess would definitely enjoy a huge boost, perhaps allowing him to turn the tables and achieve victory. Impossible, someone said with a resolute shake of their head. After one advances, their cultivation will definitely become unstable. Thus, his battle prowess can only double at most. That's nowhere near enough to suppress Gu Haoyi and the other elites. Moreover, this heavenly tribulation is absolutely terrifying. Even if he manages to overcome it, he'll definitely have to pay a huge price. At that time, he'll have to face 6 powerful elites with severe wounds. How can he achieve victory? If you ask me, I'd say that his chance of victory will decrease after he advances. Pei! Outsiders who come here to train all deserve to die. These were the people who didn't think that Ling Han would win. However, there were also those who thought the contrary. Freaks like him can't be measured according to general rules. Others might only experience double the battle prowess after advancing, but perhaps he's an exception? Moreover, who knows if he possesses some rare treasure? Only time will tell. While they were engaged in spirited discussions, heavenly tribulation had already marched over with fearsome power. The might of this heavenly tribulation was infinitesimally close to the 9th heaven, but it still hadn't crossed this threshold yet. Just as Gu Haoyi had predicted, even though Ling Han had advanced, his battle prowess had only doubled, and it was still unable to reach the barrier to the 9th heaven. Upon seeing this, Niu Zongyu, Fu Yunhai, and the others all felt reassured. They became eager with anticipation. Once Ling Han overcame his heavenly tribulation, they would immediately charge forward to attack him. Ling Han's situation was extremely dire. He was already severely wounded because of the 6 elites, and he was almost on the verge of collapsing. Now, the might of this heavenly tribulation was no weaker than the attacks of the 6 elites. Combined with his injuries, it was inevitable that he faced the risk of death. No one could defeat heavenly tribulation. One could only endure it until it concluded. If they didn't die, that could be marked down as a victory. Crack, crack, crack. Apocalyptic bolts of lightning blasted down with no reprieve. At this level, Ling Han was already unable to use these bolts of lightning to temper his body. After all, these bolts of lightning were approaching the 9th heaven. Any slip-up, and he would be killed. Ling Han wielded his divine demon sword as he battled against heavenly tribulation. 2 hours, 6 hours, 12 hours. His wounds became increasingly severe, and indestructible true fluid was already spread all over his body. However, he had already exhausted all of it during the battle just then, so he was truly at the end of his rope. His body was riddled with wounds, and even his bones could clearly be seen. Even though heavenly tribulation was about to conclude, the 6 elites had already recovered to their peak condition, with each preparing their most powerful strikes. They were going to unleash quick and brutal attacks on Ling Han, killing him in a single exchange. The direr his situation, the more composed Ling Han became. He was burning with fighting spirit, with his eyes blazing and astonishingly bright. Right now, he could battle against heavenly tribulation with a relaxed mind. This was because no one would dare to attack him at this moment. Otherwise they would be seeking death. If he further magnified this heavenly tribulation with his cultivation, only heavenly venerates would be able to rival it. 16 hours, 20 hours, 24 hours. As if preparing for an ultimate strike, the final bolt of lightning still refused to erupt. Finally, a golden fist slammed down from the clouds, with countless arcs of lightning enveloping it. It was as if heaven and earth had thrown a punch. Everyone paled in shock upon seeing this. Even their breathing became difficult, and some of them involuntarily collapsed to the ground. This was the true might of heaven and earth. They couldn't accept this. Hadn't they all become celestial kings already? Didn't they already enjoy an equivalent status with the regulations? Yet, they were actually cowering to the might of heaven and earth. If a heavenly venerate were present, they would definitely scoff at these people. Regulations were merely a set of rules created by heaven and earth. If heaven and earth were dissatisfied, they could easily scrap the regulations and replace them with something else. Once this occurred, what would celestial kings be worth? Thus, celestial kings could only enjoy an equivalent status with the regulations. Heaven and earth, however? TSK, even heavenly venerates didn't enjoy such a right at the very least. Low-level heavenly venerates didn't. Ling Han roared as he charged forward, becoming one with his sword as he soared toward the large hand. Pang! However, it was a shame that even though the divine demon sword had always been indestructible, it finally met its match at this moment. It was completely unable to shatter the iron fist, and it was instead slammed down along with its owner, crashing heavily to the ground. Crackle! Arcs of chaotic lightning flashed about, unleashing a devastating and destructive might. All regulations were obliterated, with only these arcs of lightning remaining. Everyone was speechless with shock. This was the genuine might of heaven and earth. Against such overwhelming heavenly tribulation, could Ling Han truly survive? He's dead. He's definitely dead. Even ninth heaven celestial kings would be severely wounded by that final strike, to say nothing of a newly advanced sixth heaven celestial king. It doesn't matter even if he hasn't died. He's definitely suffered severe wounds, yet there are still 6 elites waiting to attack him. By the looks of it, his fate is sealed. While they were chattering, the golden fist slowly dissipated. However, the boundless arcs of lighting enveloping the fist continued to crackle as if they wanted to reduce Ling Han to dust before they vanished. Only after 15 minutes did the fist finally disappear. The dark clouds immediately receded, instantly signaling the end of the tribulation. It was as if it had never existed in the first place. Everyone craned their neck to see if Ling Han was still alive, or if he had already been reduced to nothingness. "He's over there," someone suddenly exclaimed, pointing in a certain direction. Amid an expanse of ruins, they could see Ling Han slowly walking out. Even while being struck by that fearsome fist of lightning just then, he had still remained standing upright. Now that the fist had disappeared, he naturally walked over straight away. Waff! However, Ling Han immediately started to vomit blood. Surprisingly though, this blood was actually golden in color. In fact, one could even see pulsating symbols within this blood. Chapter 2640. Spent Force. This is our opportunity. He's severely wounded, and he's even vomiting his blood essence. Gu Haoyi said with loud laughter. With a roar, he immediately charged forward. Niu Tsongyu and the others hurriedly attacked as well. They had to kill Ling Han. Otherwise, since they had already offended Ling Han so deeply, he would definitely seek revenge in the future if he were afforded time to recover. At that time, they naturally couldn't stop this freak. Just as Gu Haoyi had said, Ling Han's wounds were truly far too severe. During the final strike of the tribulation, Ling Han had channeled the indestructible Heaven Scroll. However, he had already exhausted his energy before that, and the punch had also lingered for far too long. Thus, Ling Han had been left with no option but to combust his blood essence to channel the indestructible Heaven Scroll. Even so, his physique had still been blasted apart by heavenly tribulation, causing him to vomit blood. Moreover, it was because he had been channeling the indestructible Heaven Scroll that there were still symbols of the technique pulsating within his blood essence. Right now, he was in an incredibly feeble state. In fact, even an ordinary sixth heaven celestial king might be able to kill him. Yet, he was facing the attacks of 6 powerful elites. What could he do? Boom! The attacks arrived. Pang pang pang. Bursts of energy erupted, instantly evaporating the entire lake. In fact, the entire region beneath them was flattened, creating a sea-sized crater. Many sixth heaven celestial kings were unable to dodge in time, and they were all obliterated into smithereens by the devastating shock waves. Many more were also wounded. The combined attack of the 6 elites was absolutely petrifying. Ling Han was most likely dead. The 6 elites paid absolutely no heed to others as they scoured the surroundings for Ling Han's corpse. However, they found no such thing. It can't be. Our attack was definitely too powerful for that brat to block. However, with the might of his physique, there should at least be a corpse. Perhaps heavenly tribulation was too powerful, and it already damaged his physique? That would be a shame. The 6 elites all wore a deep frown. If Ling Han had been turned into dust, then they would have wasted all these years of hard work and patience. They would have gone to all these lengths for nothing. Thus, they were naturally unwilling to accept this. This was especially the case for Gu Haoyi. He was still hoping for the greenish-black flowing ripple fruit to advance to the 8th heaven, thereby allowing him to rival 9th heaven celestial kings. However, his plan had fallen apart, so he was naturally feeling extremely stifled, as if he couldn't find an avenue to unleash his rage. I feel like we've overlooked something. Are you guys looking for me? Ling Han's voice traveled over. Whoosh. With a flash, he had already appeared before them. He was still riddled with wounds, and he was still drenched in blood, his bones exposed. However, his wounds hadn't become more severe. Gu Haoyi finally connected the dots, exclaiming, "You hid in a spatial celestial tool just then." The reality was extremely simple. The 6 elites had unleashed a fatal strike, yet Ling Han had simply entered his celestial guest residence, leaving it to the spatial celestial tool to face that attack. After all, this was a celestial tool. Something at the 9th heaven. In this world, only those with a battle prowess at or above the 9th heaven could damage celestial tools. Even so, they would still be unable to damage the divine metal itself. That being the case, how could those with a battle prowess at the 8th heaven possibly damage a celestial tool? Ling Han grinned in reply. Combined with his blood-drenched appearance, this smile appeared as harrowing as could be. "It's my turn now," he asked. Gu Haoyi forcefully calmed himself down, snorted and said, "So what if you escaped death once? In your current state, how can you possibly be our match? To say nothing of the 6 of us, even a single one of us can easily suppress you at this moment." Ling Han's condition was far too poor. Thus, what did it matter that he had advanced to the 6th heaven? Instead of rising, his battle prowess had instead fallen. "Is that so?" Ling Han said with a loud laugh. Boom! Like a raging tsunami, his aura started to explode. How is this possible? The 6 elites exclaimed in shock. How was Ling Han's strength still increasing? And at such a rapid speed? This was impossible. Stabilizing one's cultivation required a great deal of effort, with even 100 years being a short time. This was especially the case at such a high level. It wouldn't be impossible that some might still remain in the process of stabilization even after 10 billion years. Yet, Ling Han had stabilized his cultivation immediately after breaking through, and his battle prowess was increasing several folds over? How was this possible? Gu Haoyi stared at the rolled-up scroll in Ling Han's left hand. His instinct told him that this was the source of Ling Han's exploding power. After staring at it for a moment, his expression suddenly changed, and he exclaimed in deep astonishment. Dimension Scroll! He was a prodigy from the world's paramount martial academy, and he was even the most powerful disciple enrolled in the past 10 billion years. Thus, it was no surprise that he recognized the Dimension Scroll. What Dimension Scroll? Xiao and the others asked. Gu Haoyi initially didn't want to explain. After all, he viewed these 5 people with contempt. Their cultivation was but a shell, with their battle prowess being as weak as could be. However, since he might need to use these 5 people, he replied, after opening a dimension scroll, one can obtain the power of heaven and earth and immediately become a heavenly venerate. Pooh! Xiao and the others immediately spluttered in shock. They were wide-eyed and gaping, and it was as if they had become stupid. They were indeed transfixed with shock. In comparison, what was the greenish-black flowing ripple fruit worth? After obtaining it, they would only have a sliver of a chance to advance to the 9th heaven. The Dimension Scroll, however, it could directly allow one to become a heavenly venerate. Heavenly venerate. Even to 9th heaven celestial kings, this was still a lofty and unreachable proposition. How is this possible? Such a divine matter actually exists in the world? Xiao exclaimed in a trembling voice. Niao Zongyu and the others also expressed disbelief. Would this not overturn all the iron rules of cultivation? There was absolutely no need to challenge oneself and exert effort. After all, a single scroll could allow one to become a heavenly venerate. Gu Hai had no option but to say, "It's not as ideal and simple as you think. The dimension scroll can only be opened by those chosen by heaven and earth. However, this is power bestowed by heaven and earth, so heaven and earth can naturally confiscate this power as well. Moreover, those who become heavenly venerates in this manner can only become a first-tier heavenly venerate at most. So that's how it is." Niao Zongyu and the others finally understood the implications. However, the gleam in their eyes became increasingly bright. They finally understood why Ling Han hadn't activated this divine treasure. This was because he wasn't the person chosen by heaven and earth. However, perhaps they were. Even though such heavenly venerates would be controlled by heaven and earth, and even though it would be impossible to advance to the second tier, was becoming a heavenly venerate not impressive enough already? What else could they wish for? Kill him. Without Gu Hai needing to tell them, they immediately charged forward with red in their eyes. For the sake of obtaining the greenish-black flowing ripple fruit, they would be willing to fight with all their might. However, they definitely wouldn't risk their lives. After all, as long as they had enough ascending dragon pills and time, they could eventually advance to the 9th heaven. However, becoming a heavenly venerate was different. This was valuable enough for them to gamble their lives. Upon seeing this, a cold smile involuntarily appeared on Gu Hai's face. He had withheld a vital piece of information. If one of them were the person chosen by heaven and earth, the dimension scroll would automatically react to them. Right now, however, the dimension scroll remained in a state of slumber, signifying that none of them was the chosen person. Gu Hai didn't care much about this. This was because he desired much more than just becoming a first-tier heavenly venerate, much less a heavenly venerate controlled by heavenly venerate. Did people not cultivate to achieve transcendence? He naturally wouldn't reveal this information. Instead, he would let these people bet their lives. In any case, he felt like Ling Han was in an eerie state at this moment. Whoosh whoosh whoosh. Niao Zongyu and the others dashed forward, attacking Ling Han as they did so. Ling Han stepped around to dodge. His wounds were far too severe at this moment, and he was already out of power to channel the regulations. Thus, he was purely relying on the power of his physical body to move. Attack harder. He's already a spent force. Niao Zongyu and the others shouted. Chapter 2641. The counterattack begins. Niao Zongyu and the others all fought to unleash powerful attacks. None of them urged Gu Hai to help them. They naturally all had their own plans. As long as they killed Ling Han and immediately snatched the dimension scroll, if they obtained the blessing of heaven and earth, they could immediately become a heavenly venerate. At that time, how could this prison trap them? As such, it was good that Gu Hai wasn't attacking. This meant that there was one less competitor, the most powerful one at that. Moreover, Ling Han was already a spent force, so the 5 of them were more than powerful enough to kill him. Ling Han held the dimension scroll with his left hand, continuing to extract its power. Meanwhile, he held the divine demon sword with his right hand, slashing and hacking and creating space for himself. How is he still not dead? After battling for a while, Niao Zongyu and the others found it strange that Ling Han was still alive. In his state, he should have fallen over and died at any moment, so how was he still resisting with such toughness? Gu Hai finally charged forward. After observing the battle for so long, he believed that he had noticed some weaknesses. I don't know how he's doing it, but he's able to wield some of the power of the dimension scroll. It's because of this that he can still resist. Don't hold back. Once we knock the dimension scroll out of his hands, he'll become nothing but lamb for slaughter. After hearing this hint and encouragement, Niao Zongyu and the others immediately rediscovered their confidence. They continued to attack. The 6 elites unleashed their furious and relentless attacks, completely suppressing Ling Han. They were clearly enjoying an absolute advantage, yet they were unable to turn this advantage into victory no matter what they did. In their eyes, Ling Han was far too stubborn. No matter how they attacked him, once their attacks weakened a little, Ling Han would immediately recover to his original state. They couldn't kill him no matter what. Brat, why let yourself suffer so much? They started to play a mental game. You can't escape death, so why don't you choose a swifter and less painful death? Your wounds are too severe. It's impossible for you to turn the tables. However, Ling Han remained unfazed. His eyes remained looking down, not allowing the 6 people to see the killing intent hidden within them. You're too stubborn. Even if this takes 100 years, we're still going to kill this brat. With the enticement of the Dimension Scroll, Xueqi and the others naturally couldn't give up halfway. After all, the Dimension Scroll was already valuable enough for them to risk their lives, and they were more so affected by the black energy at this moment. Thus, they were naturally even more crazed and frenzied than normal. The battle continued, and they all unleashed their most powerful attacks at Ling Han. Time slowly crept by. Just like they had predicted, 1 year quickly passed by. Then another year, 10 years, 30 years. Not only had they battled for 100 years, but the battle still continued. To 8th Heaven Celestial Kings, battling for tens of thousands of years was nothing too surprising. However, the stubbornness of their opponent and his refusal to accept death was still enough to make them feel a sense of exasperation and apprehension. This young man was truly far too terrifying. If he were truly allowed to stabilize his cultivation, who at the 8th heaven could hope to wound him? However, the more this was the case, the more desperate they were to kill Ling Han. If they didn't remove this nail from their eyes, they wouldn't be able to feel at ease. Moreover, there was still the attraction of the Dimension Scroll. 100 years, 150 years, 170 years. Ling Han suddenly stopped, not dodging anymore. Haha, have you finally accepted your fate? Fu Yunhai said with loud laughter. He lunged forward, throwing a fist at Ling Han's forehead. Meanwhile, his left hand clawed at the Dimension Scroll. He was going to kill Ling Han and snatch the Dimension Scroll in a single breath. Once he obtained the Dimension Scroll, he could immediately become a heavenly venerate. At that time, he could dominate the entire Celestial King graveyard without a worry in his mind. Of course, he didn't for a second consider that he might not be the person chosen by heaven and earth. He refused to accept this possibility. Fu Yunhai's punch arrived, and a smile stretched across his face. Success was imminent. Xueqi and the others had initially thought that this was a trap by Ling Han. However, upon seeing him remain still even as the fist arrived, they involuntarily started to regret their decision to hold back. By the looks of it, Ling Han had truly given up. They hurriedly lunged forward. Even if they were slower, they still had to fight for the Dimension Scroll. Pang! Ling Han suddenly unleashed a fearsome punch. In this instant, he didn't control his power anymore. Boom! Like a crashing tsunami, an overwhelming power surged forth with vigor and violence. His attack had come later, yet it arrived first. This was the specialty of body art's explosive power. Fu Yunhai wore an expression of deep shock and disbelief as the fist smashed into his face. Pooh! The fist sunk deep into his head before exiting through the back. Shield of origin power? It was as futile as a sheet of paper. Fu Yunhai was unable to even put up a struggle as his mind was immediately obliterated, dying in an instant. His limbs became limp as he hung on Ling Han's fist. Fuck! 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 Xueqi and the others became pale with terror. How would they still dare to attack? They desperately tried to stop in their tracks. However, they had all been charging forward to fight for the Dimension Scroll just then, and they had all been doing so with all their strength. Thus, how could they halt this momentum? This was a hilarious sight. The 4 elites were charging toward Ling Han, yet they all wore expressions of absolute terror, with their hands and feet furiously flailing in an attempt to stop themselves. However, no one could laugh out loud. This was because they had witnessed the grisly sight of Fu Yunhai's head being obliterated. This had stunned them into silence, and they still had yet to regain their composure. Pang 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 pang. Ling Han unleashed 4 punches in a row, sending Xueqi and the others flying. Fortunately, they were defending with all their might, so they weren't easily killed like Fu Yunhai. They only vomited blood, and they weren't smashed into smithereens. Gu Haoyi also ground to a halt, his face filled with astonishment. He was unable to accept the reality of Ling Han suddenly becoming so fearsome. You endured this entire time just to unleash your power at this moment. he asked in a solemn voice. Ling Han replied with a faint smile. This person was smarter than the others, correctly guessing his intentions. When extracting power from the Dimension Scroll, he could actually unleash this power in an instant. However, if he did so, the 6 people would definitely flee upon noticing the changing situation. In that case, he would only be able to kill 1 or 2 of them at most. He wouldn't be able to kill all of them. Thus, he decided to endure, not unleashing the power that he had obtained. Only at this moment did he finally unleash it. "You did this because you want to kill all of us," Gu Hai exclaimed, his voice quivering slightly. He could only think of a single possibility. Ling Han applauded, saying, "Correct." With a flick of his hands, Fu Yunhai's corpse was instantly tossed into the distance. Pang! He collapsed to the ground like a heap of trash. Gu Hai sucked in a sharp breath. Diao Yu started to wipe his cold sweat. Niuzong Yu felt his knees shaking, and Xueqi felt his heart contracting. The person before them was far too terrifying. In order to kill them all, he had actually chosen to endure so much. Had he not been afraid of slipping up and being killed? However, he had indeed endured until this moment. Now, it was their turn to be hunted. Flee! Their eyes flickered, yet none of them moved. This was because the first person to flee would definitely be the first person to be targeted by Ling Han. That would only result in death, and it would create an opportunity for the others to escape. Ling Han smiled faintly. He held up the Dimension Scroll and waved it around, saying, "You guys want it?" Niuzong Yu, Rong Wenlin, and Xueqi immediately shook their heads. However, Diao Yu was unwilling to be toyed around with by Ling Han, or perhaps he had more of a backbone than the others, and he said, "So what if I want it? Are you willing to give it to me?" "Sure." With a flick of his hands, Ling Han genuinely tossed the Dimension Scroll toward Diao Yu. Dimension Scroll instinctively caught it. Only when he gripped the Dimension Scroll firmly did he finally come to his senses. Delight swept over him, and he was so overjoyed that he couldn't even speak. How could such a wonderful thing occur? Had Ling Han's brain been damaged? Chapter 2642. Merciless Toying. Upon seeing this, Niuzong Yu and the others wanted to grab a hammer to bash themselves to death. Why hadn't they nodded? Even Gu Hai found this incredibly strange. What was Ling Han playing at? However, he immediately came to a realization. None of them could open the scroll anyway, so Ling Han was simply pretending to be generous. In reality, he was actually toying with them. Diao Yu faltered for a moment before hurriedly using his other hand to open the scroll. Once he succeeded, he could immediately soar into the heavens and become the most powerful person in the Celestial King graveyard. In fact, even after he left this place, he could still act wantonly thanks to this newfound strength. Heavenly venerates were transcendent above regulations. However, it was too late for Niuzong Yu and the others to feel regret now. Their reaction was too slow, so they could only look on in helplessness. Diao Yu's hands were trembling slightly. The Dimension Scroll was almost weightless, yet he felt as if it were as heavy as a mountain. His heart was about to leap out from his throat. He was beside himself with excitement, and with a flick of his finger, the Dimension Scroll actually opened. It opened. Everyone was stunned upon seeing this. Were they about to witness a miracle? Were they going to witness the birth of a heavenly venerate, someone who would dominate the world from here on? Fact. Why hadn't this fortune fallen to them? Not only Niuzong Yu and his companions, but even the celestial kings below had extremely complicated feelings. They felt an urge to roar at Ling Han, asking him why he didn't give the Dimension Scroll to them. Even Gu Hai couldn't understand this at all. In his mind, Ling Han wasn't this type of person. Even if Ling Han couldn't open the Dimension Scroll, he still wouldn't give it to others for nothing, right? Moreover, how did Diao Yu manage to open the Dimension Scroll? This didn't make sense. Ha ha ha! Mere mortals, bow before me. After opening the Dimension Scroll, Diao Yu spread his arms and closed his eyes, an expression of intoxication on his face. After opening the Dimension Scroll, he could obtain the blessing of heaven and earth, something that could transform even mere mortals into heavenly venerates. Because this was the power of heaven and earth, the power of a realm, It could naturally transform anyone it wanted into a heavenly venerate. Jiao Yu was far too smug at this moment. As he swept his gaze around, his eyes were filled with disdain and scorn as if everyone was beneath him. He was already on a different level from these people. These people were nothing but mere ants. Jiao Yu's eyes were cold as he peered at Ling Han from the corners of his eyes, and he said, "Taking into account your contribution, I can spare you from death. Kneel down and submit to me." This was clearly a weakling being intoxicated by success. Ling Han scoffed, saying, "Are you stupid?" "Impudence," Jiao Yu said with a cold sneer. He raised his hand and swatted at Ling Han. Before a mighty heavenly venerate, this measly person still dared to act with such disrespect, such foolishness and insolence. Ling Han shook his head as he replied with a punch. Pang! Jiao Yu was instantly sent flying, crashing into a mountain peak several hundred kilometers away. Under the huge force, the mountain peak was immediately shattered and broken. However, Jiao Yu was also stopped in his tracks. How is this possible? Jiao Yu shouted as he shakily hovered in the sky. He had already become a heavenly venerate, yet he was still unable to block Ling Han's punch. Xiao and the others couldn't help but shake their heads. They could see everything clearly. Jiao Yu was still the same Jiao Yu as always. Had his strength gone up by a single iota, that dimension scroll or whatnot was an absolute fake. However, Gu Hui didn't think this. Shock spread across his face as he said, "I understand. I know why your body art is so powerful now. It's because you absorbed the power of the dimension scroll." What? Everyone was stunned. Hadn't Ling Han told them himself that only those chosen by heaven and earth could open the dimension scroll? If it were others, even if they were ninth heaven celestial kings, they would still be unable to open the dimension scroll. Otherwise, wouldn't the power of heaven and earth be worthless? Yet, Ling Han could extract power from the dimension scroll? Was this not inconceivable? However, this speculation was extremely logical. Ling Han's body art had indeed overcome some barrier. Ling Han nodded, saying, "I have to say, you are quite an intelligent person. You've already extracted all of the power from this dimension scroll?" Gu Hui asked. "Otherwise, you wouldn't have tossed it to someone else." "Correct," Ling Han said, not disputing this speculation. Otherwise, even if he wanted to toy with Gu Hui and the others, he wouldn't have risked the dimension scroll. After all, what if one of them was truly the chosen one? Jiao Yu naturally heard this as well, and his face involuntarily became beet red. As a mighty eighth heaven celestial king, he had actually been fooled like a monkey. He shook in fury. He had been so excited just then. He had been so smug. It was as if he had obtained a peerless treasure. In the end, however, he had actually been fooled. He was like a clown, giving the performance of his life before everyone. He had lost all face. He felt frustration, and he felt rage. He wanted to kill someone. However, Jiao Yu's next action took everyone by surprise. Turning around, he immediately fled into the distance. Weighing fury against life, what was the former worth? Ling Han was far too powerful at this moment, and Jiao Yu couldn't rival him at all. Thus, would he charge over to seek death? The higher level a celestial king, the less they were affected by the black energy. They would indeed have increased bloodlust, yet they wouldn't seek death for no reason. "You still want to flee?" Ling Han said with a shake of his head. Whoosh! Drawing on his terrifying strength, he immediately shot forward and caught up to Jiao Yu. He then threw a punch. With Ling Han's current explosive power, unless his opponent was skilled in the regulations of space, they would be unable to escape from his grasp. Pooh! With a single punch, Ling Han's fist instantly exited through the front of Jiao Yu's chest. Jiao Yu slowly looked down. He wanted to speak, yet his head immediately flopped to the side, signaling his death. 2 eighth heaven celestial kings. Yet they were easily killed by Ling Han just like that. Everyone was stunned. They all became numb. Meanwhile, Xiao and the others all felt a cold chill run down their spines. An unspeakable feeling of bitterness and anguish washed over them. They exchanged a glance before fleeing in different directions. Now was the best time to flee. Otherwise, there would be no other opportunity. "You guys didn't p***s off when I told you to, yet you still want to leave now?" Ling Han said with a humph. He immediately leaped forward. Pang! His speed was indescribable, and he caught up to Xueqi in an instant, killing him with a single punch. However, Rong Wenlin and Yingxiong had already escaped into the distance, and he could only catch up to one of them. Whom should he choose? Ling Han gave a soft roar. Swoosh! He threw his divine demon sword, which transformed into a streak of light that shot toward Yingxiong. Meanwhile, he dashed toward Rong Wenlin. Ah! There was a scream of agony as the divine demon sword pierced through Yingxiong's shoulder, nailing him to the ground. The murderous aura of the divine demon sword rushed into his body, rapidly dismantling his battle prowess. Meanwhile, Rong Wenlin was also quickly hunted down by Ling Han. He tried to counterattack, but how could he possibly rival Ling Han? In a short few exchanges, he was brutally blasted into pieces. Ling Han casually swaggered back, arriving beside Yingxiong. Yingxiong looked up and begged for his life. Please forgive. Pooh! Ling Han stomped down, instantly crushing Yingxiong's head. This was the eighth heaven celestial king to be killed. Ling Han retrieved his divine demon sword before looking at Gu Haoyi with a strange expression. You actually didn't flee? I, Gu Haoyi, have experienced countless battles in my life. I've never fled without even battling, Gu Haoyi said with a proud expression. Ling Han nodded and said, because of your words, I've decided to erect a tombstone for you. Ling Han, you're far too arrogant, Gu Haoyi said with a humph. Even if your strength has soared, it's still nothing but a dream if you want to kill me. Then why don't we try? Ling Han strode forward with his sword. Even though he had killed 5 eighth heaven celestial kings in a row, the sum of their strength was still inferior to that of Gu Haoyi. Gu Haoyi also drew his sword. He then took a deep breath before saying, I'll borrow your strength to advance to the 8th heaven. Since Ling Han could advance during battle, he could definitely do so as well. Because he was Gu Haoyi. Chapter 2643. 10 Demon Soul Capturing Sword. Gu Haoyi was filled with confidence. Since Ling Han could advance during battle, he could definitely do so as well. In terms of talent alone, he was no weaker than anyone. Ling Han shook his head saying, I'll behead you within 100 exchanges. Gu Haoyi remained silent. Ling Han was correct. If he didn't advance, he could only last 100 exchanges at most. However, he was confident that under this life-and-death pressure, this would be enough time. Ling Han also didn't speak anymore. At this time, it would be pointless to say anything else. He strode forward, bearing down on Gu Haoyi. Gu Haoyi held up his sword. This was a celestial tool, and at this moment, numerous symbols lit up, radiating with a terrifying aura. Ling Han lunged forward, stabbing with his sword. All of his fury gathered at the tip of his blade. When entering the martial academy, Gu Haoyi had already expressed hostility toward him. This was because Ling Han was the Empress lover. When entering an ancient ruin, Gu Haoyi had set up a deadly trap for Ling Han. However, because the heavenly venerate hadn't actually been dead, that had instead resulted in Gu Haoyi, Xiao Yingxiong, and the others almost being massacred completely. Now the three of them had pursued Ling Han into the Celestial King graveyard, with their attacks almost leading to his death. Who could endure such villainy? In any case, Ling Han couldn't endure this. Accompanied by his roar, his divine demon sword unleashed a boundless radiance. It was as if he had become an invincible god of war. Come battle! Gu Haoyi roared as he charged forward with his sword. Clang! This was their first exchange, and Gu Haoyi was immediately sent flying, only coming to a halt after several hundred kilometers. His face was as white as a sheet, and his entire body was shaking slightly. One had to realize that Ling Han was purely relying on his body art at this moment, something that didn't depend on the regulations. Even though he couldn't draw on the power of heaven and earth, the strength of his body allowed him to unleash even more chaotic and destructive power. Gu Haoyi felt like every bone in his body was rattling. It was as if they were about to shatter at any moment. I overestimated you. Perhaps you can't even withstand 10 exchanges, Ling Han said in a calm voice. However, he felt pity in his mind. He had finally exhausted the power of the Dimension Scroll. In the future, he wouldn't be able to rely on it to elevate his body art anymore. Moreover, because he had relied on one of the 6 source powers of the Genesis world to temper his body, he would be unable to elevate his body art any further without this sort of power. He would be stuck at this level forever. This was unless he could absorb the 6 source powers again. However, that would at least have to wait until he reached the 9th heaven. However, Ling Han only felt slight pity. Right now, his evolution index had already reached 12, and he had more so mastered 3 heavenly venerate techniques. Thus, which celestial king would he fear? He charged forward again, not showing Gu Hai an inkling of mercy. Gu Hai met his attacks. However, he was completely unable to block them, and he was easily sent flying again. Wah! He violently vomited blood, and it was as if his insides had been turned upside down. In fact, he felt an urge to throw up even his internal organs. Gu Hai's expression changed drastically. Even though he was filled with confidence, the prerequisite to advancing under pressure was that he could cope with this pressure. For example, even though Ling Han had been riddled with wounds at that time, he had still been able to guard his own life. However, Gu Hai's situation was different. Each strike could seemingly send him into hell. At this point, this wasn't simple life and death pressure. Instead, these were strikes that could directly lead to his death. If this continued, to say nothing of advancing during battle, it was very likely that he would be killed before long. "Fuse with my soul and spirit," he roared. He then grabbed at his head, forcefully extracting a streak of azure and white, and pressing them into his celestial tool. He practiced the 10-demon soul-capturing sword, a technique that could destroy one's soul and spirit. By sacrificing his own divine sense first, he could cause the might of his technique to increase tenfold. Of course, the price to pay was also huge. A person only had 3 souls and 7 spirits, so by sacrificing a soul and a spirit at this moment, he was causing irrevocable damage to his future. However, he had no other choice. If he didn't fight with his life, his only fate would be death. Moreover, Gu Hai firmly believed that he could advance during battle. Die! He charged forward with his divine sword, unleashing the 10-demon soul-capturing sword. His battle prowess instantly soared into the 9th heaven, finally giving him the right to rival Ling Han. His battle prowess was also at the 9th heaven. Ling Han roared with laughter. He naturally wouldn't be afraid. He slashed and hacked with his divine demon sword, facing Gu Hai's strikes head-on. Wang! Gu Hai unleashed a spiritual attack. However, it was a shame that Ling Han had already advanced, meaning that this kind of attack could only cause some slight pain in his mind. With Ling Han's willpower, he could naturally endure this with ease. As such, its effect on him was negligible. They continued to battle. Both prodigies displayed their might. However, even though Gu Hai had already gone as far as to cripple himself to raise his battle prowess, he was still slightly weaker than Ling Han. He was sent flying left and right by Ling Han, suffering a clear disadvantage. Gu Hai remained solemn and calm. At the very least, he had stabilized himself now. What he needed to do next was to advance. Ling Han shook his head. Gu Hai's expectations were far too idealistic. Advancing during battle required a lot of prerequisites to be fulfilled, the most important among them being that one had already reached the peak stage of a cultivation level. For example, why had Ling Han held back for so long just then? Was it not to refine the celestial fruits? This was a process of accumulation, something that required an exorbitant amount of time. However, advancing to the next level only required an opportunity. For example, facing life and death pressure. In such an environment, advancing might come swiftly and naturally. However, even though Gu Hai was already at the peak stage of the 7th heaven, he was still a small distance away from reaching the pinnacle. Otherwise, as a supreme monarch star, how would he need any celestial fruits? There would be no barriers to speak of, and he could directly advance to the next cultivation level. This amount of distance was nothing to Gu Hai. As long as he had a few dozen millions of years, he would definitely be able to overcome this distance and easily reach the 8th heaven. However, the problem was, could he endure until that time? Gu Hai had crippled himself to increase his battle prowess. How long could that last? Ling Han's left hand balled into a fist as he channeled the 3 lightning technique. He then buffed it with the 9 transformations divine scroll, allowing each of his punches to become chaotic and explosive. His physical body was his most terrifying and destructive weapon. Pang pang pang. Their exchanges were deafening, and Gu Haoyi finally started to suffer wounds. Blood sprayed through the air, and it was clear that his opponent's power had already exceeded his limits. Even after sacrificing a soul and a spirit, the 10-demon soul-capturing sword was still no match for Ling Han. Sacrifice another soul and spirit, Gu Haoyi said through gritted teeth. He grabbed another streak of azure and white from his head before pressing them into his celestial tool. His battle prowess instantly increased another threefold. Even though it was only threefold, this was threefold on top of the tenfold that he had already experienced. In other words, this was a whopping 30-fold increase of his original battle prowess. At this moment, he could finally hold his own against Ling Han. Ling Han, I, Gu Haoyi, have never been weaker than anyone. Gu Haoyi roared. Ling Han scoffed, saying, I'm a level below you, and you've more so activated a sacrificial technique. Even so, you can only draw level with me, yet you still have the face to say that you've never been weaker than anyone? Gu Haoyi was instantly rendered speechless. He had felt far too stifled when being suppressed by Ling Han just then, so after finally drawing level, he felt as if he were gaining an advantage as the underdog. Yet, he had forgotten that Ling Han was only at the 6th heaven. This person was the true freak. How could Gu Haoyi compare with him? I don't believe this, Gu Haoyi roared. His fighting spirit raged and he said, It's because of your immense fortune. It's because of this that you could extract the power from the dimension scroll. You're being helped by the heavens. Otherwise, at the same cultivation level, how could I be afraid of you? Not to mention that I have an advantage of 1 cultivation level. No matter how much nonsense you spew, you still can't change the fact that you're a loser. Ling Han said, with each word piercing into his opponent's heart like a dagger. His divine demon sword thrust forth, not showing an iota of mercy. Chapter 2644. Foregone conclusion. Gu Haoyi was unable to respond. No matter how confident he felt, he was unable to change the reality that Ling Han was a cultivation level below him. Even so, Gu Haoyi still needed to cripple himself in order to raise his cultivation level. Only by doing so could he rival Ling Han. There was no need for comparisons. The gulf between them was clear with a single glance. However, Gu Haoyi was a monarch star, after all. He had experienced countless battles during his lifetime, so how could he be shaken so easily? He immediately hardened his resolve. What did it matter that Ling Han was more freakish than him? Once Gu Haoyi reached the 8th heaven, he would be able to kill Ling Han. Regardless of how talented a dead person once was. What difference could this make? Die! Gu Haoyi activated the 10-demon soul-capturing sword, unleashing a profound might. He also knew about his own weaknesses, so he started to ingest all kinds of pills. At this moment, he no longer cared about whether he could absorb the effects of all these pills or not. This was his only opportunity, so he naturally had to take a risk. However, Ling Han wasn't worried at all. If Gu Haoyi could truly advance like this, then that would be viewing cultivation in far too simplistic a manner. Ling Han swung his sword again and again, with each strike being powerful enough to shatter countless heavenly bodies. Right now, Ling Han was far too powerful. His body art was fused together with the power of regulations, causing his battle prowess to directly soar to the 9th heaven. Reaching each subsequent heaven was as difficult as ascending the heavens. Thus, a difference of 1 cultivation level was like the gulf between heaven and earth. The 9th heaven was more so an insurmountable barrier. Overcoming this barrier would elevate one's battle prowess by an immense amount. Gu Haoyi could just barely hold on. However, he would need to pay a huge price each time he blocked Ling Han's strike. This was an identical situation to what Ling Han had faced before. Now Ling Han's opponent was riddled with wounds, with blood drenching his body, his bones also showing. He appeared as miserable as could be. Gu Haoyi roared in fury. However, he didn't dare to sacrifice his soul and spirit again. Otherwise, he would die on the spot. However, if this continued, he would also be struggling in vain. If he continued to battle, he would definitely be killed. He couldn't go on like this. With a long roar, he turned around to flee. If he lived, there would still be hope. He was only a step away from reaching the 8th heaven, So once he overcame this barrier, he could return to suppress Ling Han. He would definitely succeed. Ling Han snickered, saying, "Who said they would never flee in fear?" He chased after Gu Hui. Even though he couldn't draw much power from the regulations, the explosive power of his body art was immense. With a single step, he instantly caught up. He then threw a punch with his left hand. Gu Hui had no option but to block this strike. Boom, clang, boom. Their swords clanged and their fists collided as they started to battle head-on again. This hurt Gu Hui far too much. However, Ling Han was relentless, so the former had no option but to block his strikes. Otherwise, he would definitely be hit. In his current state, how would he dare to take another hit from Ling Han? Gu Hui vomited blood. Even though he could still block Ling Han right now, the divine sense that he had sacrificed was already about to disappear. The might of the 10-demon soul-capturing sword was decreasing drastically, so how would he block Ling Han afterward? Even though he could still struggle to block Ling Han at this moment, it was as if he could already see the god of death waving at him. If there were no reinforcements, it was inevitable that Gu Hui would be killed. However, who would save him at this moment? Gu Hui gritted his teeth as he continued to resist. However, he couldn't turn the tables at all. At some point in time, his battle prowess suddenly dropped off a cliff. The divine sense that he had sacrificed had already burned up. It was unable to help him anymore. Gu Hui's expression instantly became ashen. In his current state, he would struggle to block another strike from Ling Han. Trash from the outside world, die. Right at this moment, however, there was a deep rumble as a person shot over from the distance. He radiated with a powerful aura, and he was more so surrounded by numerous ribbons of iridescent light that were even brighter than the stars. Reinforcements? Delight appeared on Gu Hui's face. However, upon seeing 8 ribbons of iridescent light around the person, his expression of hope and delight involuntarily turned into disappointment. How could an 8th heaven celestial king block the 9th heaven battle prowess of Ling Han? Unless it was a supreme monarch star like Xiao Yingxiong and Miao Hua. Ling Han naturally saw this as well, and he wasn't worried at all. He slashed down with his sword. Pooh! Gu Hui was instantly cut into 2. Wang! His divine sword fell from his hand, and flew into the distance. A prodigy was erased from the world just like that. Celestial Tool, the 8th heaven celestial king who had just arrived, exclaimed. He was overcome with delight. He had only charged over because he had heard the news that there were 2 outsiders here. However, he hadn't expected that he would receive such a valuable present. This was a celestial tool. In this place, even 9th heaven celestial kings could barely get their hands on such a treasure. He quickly dashed forward. Whoosh! He caught up to Gu Hui's divine sword, and grabbed it in his hand. The celestial tool instantly unleashed its might, with a gleam of cold light slashing at the celestial king. This was a treasure refined by Gu Hui, so even though it hadn't reached his level, its might was still extraordinary. Its creator had been a supreme monarch star, after all. It was more than powerful enough to rival the 8th heaven celestial king. The 8th heaven celestial king was overjoyed, and he was completely focused on trying to obtain the celestial tool. Only after failing to obtain it after a dozen attempts did he finally feel astonishment. This celestial tool had had an owner before, yet this person had already been killed. That being the case, just how powerful was his opponent? Right now, was he not trying to snatch prey from a tiger's mouth? Was he not seeking death? With this in mind, he involuntarily stopped his movements in fright. Scanning the surroundings with his divine sense, he indeed discovered Ling Han standing 90 meters away. His arms crossed before his chest as if he were enjoying a show. The celestial tool didn't seize this opportunity to counterattack, either, instead turning around to flee into the clouds. Get down! Ling Han reached out to grab at the divine sword. You're asking for trouble, the 8th heaven celestial king said in his mind. Without battle prowess at the 9th heaven, how could anyone possibly face a celestial tool head-on? That was the most supreme being in the level of regulations. However, his eyes almost popped out of their sockets in the next instant. This was because Ling Han directly grabbed the divine sword with his bare hand. Not the sword's hilt but the sword's blade. Fuck! He's a freak. Cold sweat instantly drenched the 8th heaven celestial king. He couldn't help but shake in fear. Ling Han tightly gripped the blade of the sword. If this celestial tool were being wielded by a ninth heaven celestial king, he definitely wouldn't dare to grab it just like that. This was because the combination of their power could definitely slice through his skin and even wound his godly bones. It was possible that they could directly sever his fingers. However, this was a sword with no owner, so it could at most only unleash a battle prowess at the peak stage of the eighth heaven. Thus, did Ling Han need to be afraid? No matter how sharp a weapon, it still needed an owner to unleash its true might. Ling Han smiled faintly as he placed restriction after restriction on the celestial tool, sealing its power. He then tossed it into his celestial guest residence. He would slowly refine this celestial tool in the future. After doing this, he turned to the eighth heaven celestial king with a smile, and said, "What did you say just then?" The eighth heaven celestial king wore an awkward expression. He had failed to suppress the celestial tool after several dozen exchanges, yet Ling Han dealt with it in a single grab. The gulf between them was as clear as day. The man hurriedly forced a smile and said, "This junior was saying that senior is far too mighty. In a single glance, it's clear that senior is a dragon among men and as domineering as can be." An eighth heaven celestial king was actually referring to a sixth heaven celestial king as senior? Ling Han was astonished. This person was an eighth heaven celestial king after all, so how could he be so shameless? Whoosh! At this moment, the eighth heaven celestial king suddenly turned around to flee. He hadn't placed his hopes on Ling Han being benevolent. Instead, he had purposefully tricked Ling Han into lowering his guard, buying himself time to flee. Once he set off, even ninth heaven celestial kings would find it difficult to catch up to him. However, just as he started to flee, he suddenly discovered that there was already a person standing before him, with their hands clasped behind their back. It was as if they were taking a casual stroll. Who was this person if not Ling Han? Chapter 2645. Fourth Land of Inheritance. How is he so quick? The eighth heaven celestial king was both astonished and terrified. He had clearly moved before Ling Han, yet Ling Han had already appeared before him. "Why are you fleeing?" Ling Han asked. "This." The eighth heaven celestial king's eyes darted around for a moment before he replied, "This junior's bladder is about to burst, so I wanted to find somewhere to relieve myself." Ling Han couldn't help but laugh. This person was indeed shameless to the extreme. Ling Han harbored no good feelings toward those in the celestial king graveyard, and even less so now that they were affected by the black energy. Even though this person appeared honest and respectful now, this was merely because Ling Han was more powerful than him. If their positions had been reversed, this eighth heaven celestial king would have definitely revealed his fangs already. Ling Han shook his head, saying, "Since you've come to kill the outsider that I am, why don't you attack?" The eighth heaven celestial king hurriedly shook his head, saying, "Senior, you truly like to joke. How could a mighty and powerful person such as yourself possibly be an outsider? You're definitely one of us." Ling Han felt speechless. He casually swung his sword, causing the eighth heaven celestial king to hurriedly stumble back in fright. Whoosh whoosh whoosh. His attacks became faster and faster, and the eighth heaven celestial king only managed to dodge 3 strikes before being sliced into 2. Swoosh! Ling Han leaped into the air, and immediately soared into the distance. After making it far away enough, he entered the celestial guest residence. Even though he appeared mighty and invincible, the wounds that he had suffered before were no laughing matter. It was only because his fighting spirit had been far too ferocious that he had suppressed these wounds the entire time. Now that his enemies had been exterminated, he naturally needed to take a rest to heal his wounds. This rest lasted an entire 130,000 years. Ling Han was not only recovering from his wounds, but he was also using this opportunity to stabilize his cultivation. With the acceleration of time, this 130,000 years was also transformed into 130 million years. Thus, his cultivation was naturally stabilized. In fact, he even made some further progress. This kind of brutal battle where they exchanged wounds and risked their lives was most beneficial to elevating their cultivation. Of course, the prerequisite was that they weren't killed or wounded too severely. The Empress also managed to stabilize her cultivation. Moreover, because she had no wounds to recover from, her advancement was even quicker than Ling Han's. However, the difference wasn't that great. After all, at the sixth heaven, unless they had the help of some great herb, it might require hundreds of billions of years to advance a single level. Thus, what was over 100 million years in this context? Ling Han and the Empress held hands as they exited the celestial guest residence. Their adventure in this place had yet to conclude. During this time, Ling Han had naturally fed Gu Hai's celestial tool to the divine demon sword as well. However, it was far too hard to elevate a celestial tool into a heavenly venerate tool. This was like the gulf between ninth heaven celestial kings and heavenly venerates as wide as heaven and earth. It was hard to say how much more divine metal he would need. Gu Hai's wealth was astonishing. After all, he was a supreme monarch star and a big shot of the Martial Academy. He had more so been a celestial king for heaven knows how many years. Thus, even Ling Han was given a small surprise. However, it was a shame that there were no treasures to increase his cultivation. This was very normal. If such treasures had existed, they would have already been used by Gu Hao and helped him reach the eighth heaven. In that case, Ling Han might not have been able to kill him with a single slash. Ling Han used these resources to elevate his physique. Practicing the indestructible heaven scroll required such weird and wonderful trinkets. Right now, Ling Han's physique had already advanced another step, reaching the seventh heaven. Compared to his battle prowess, however, it was greatly inferior. Xiao, Yingxiong and Miao Hua are likely very wealthy as well. If I can obtain their wealth, perhaps my indestructible celestial king physique can near a consummate level. Ling Han and the Empress set off again. Their 5 elements lightning technique was still 2 elements short. Right now, they could genuinely run around without a fear in the world. Ling Han already possessed a 9th heaven battle prowess, while the Empress could also reach the peak stage of the 8th heaven in terms of strength with the help of her celestial tool. Each of them was powerful enough to hold their own. Even so, the hunt for their heads didn't cease. The people here detested outsiders who came to train far too much. However, it was a shame that they were merely seeking death and handing their wealth over on a platter. Ling Han felt it a pity, however, that these people were far too poor. Killing them didn't reap many benefits. Their travels continued for 7 years, and during this time, a countless number of 8th heaven celestial kings had died at their hands. Moreover, Ling Han hadn't needed to deal with them at all. Indeed, the Empress was powerful enough to dispose of them by herself. This also caused them to appear increasingly dangerous to the others. During the past 2 years, no more 8th heaven celestial kings had charged over to kill them. Strangely enough, however, 9th heaven celestial kings hadn't appeared, either. Ling Han remembered that he had killed many second-generation young masters, so why had these 9th heaven celestial kings still not shown themselves? Perhaps some supreme treasure had appeared in this realm? Perhaps these elites were locked in an intense battle and unable to leave. Several days later, a mountain appeared before the couple. This was a dazzling golden mountain. Looking closely, however, it was clear that many swords had been stabbed into the mountain, making it look like it was filled with spikes. Between these swords, arcs of golden lightning crackled. Lightning of metal! Ling Han and the Empress exclaimed as they exchanged a glance. Their faces were filled with delight. This was the 4th land of inheritance. They continued forward, arriving at the foot of the mountain. Wang! The mountain face shuddered slightly before 7 swords automatically flew up and turned toward them. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh! The 7 swords slashed at Ling Han and the Empress in unison. These weren't ordinary attacks, and the swords had instead formed a formation. Thus, even though there were only 7 swords, their might was as if they were an army of tens and thousands. The Empress stepped forward to battle against the 7 swords. Pang! 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 After a while, the Empress successfully suppressed the 7 swords. However, she had a short temper, so she directly shattered them. Daring to attack her was a sign of great disrespect. Thus, they naturally deserved to be shattered. The 2 of them continued to climb the mountain. After taking a few steps, another 9 swords flew up and started to attack them. Here, battling was the main theme. They would trigger the swords each time they advanced a few steps, and the number of swords that attacked them would also increase every time. The formations the blades created would also become increasingly complex, thereby raising their might as well. Fortunately, Both Ling Han and the Empress were incredibly powerful people. Thus, they were unafraid regardless of how many swords attacked them. There was no one else on the mountain. However, this made sense. If one hadn't received the inheritances of the 3 previous areas, why would they waste their time here? Battling against these swords would reap no benefit at all. Wife, have you realized? If we want to obtain the inheritance of this place, the key might lie in the formations formed by the swords, Ling Han said. The Empress nodded in agreement. The sword formations were ever-changing, so perhaps understanding them would allow them to comprehend the secret of this mountain. They could then find the formation eye and trigger its magnificent power. At that time, they could not only obtain another inheritance, but perhaps even elevate their cultivation. With this in mind, the Empress stopped destroying the swords after defeating them. The two of them started to wander around the mountain, battling against the different sword formations, and obtaining all kinds of enlightenment. After half a year, they exchanged a glance and smiled in unison. They had already grasped the secret of this mountain. Let's go! They climbed the mountain again. This time, however, they took a different path from before. Strangely, no more swords flew up to form a formation and attack them. In just half a day, they reached the peak of the mountain. It wasn't that they hadn't reached the mountain peak before, it was just that they were greeted by a completely different scene this time. This was the mystery and wonder of formations. However, there was a person sitting cross-legged in the center of the mountain peak, surrounded by countless small golden swords. Looking closely, these swords weren't corporeal, but instead were formed with energy. Ling Han frowned upon seeing this. Yingxiong. Chapter 2646. 2646 Battling Yingxiong again. 2646 Battling Yingxiong again. The person sitting cross-legged on the mountain peak was none other than Yingxiong. However, this made sense. He wasn't blood brothers with Gu Haoyi or Miao Hua, and they had only entered the Celestial King graveyard together in order to hunt and kill Ling Han. Thus, when they came across opportunities, they would naturally do what was in their own interests. However, Ling Han truly hadn't imagined that Yingxiong would actually obtain the inheritance of this place before them. Shua! At this moment, Yingxiong suddenly opened his eyes. 2 sword projections instantly flashed across them, and there was more so the brilliance of lightning. He stood up. Crackle! His entire body radiated with the might of lightning, and he wore a haughty expression as he looked at Ling Han, and asked, "Have you come here to seek death?" Ling Han naturally wouldn't back down, saying, "I coincidentally want to kill you as well. Who knew that I would find you so easily?" "Haha, can you?" Yingxiong said in disdain. Ling Han smiled faintly, saying, "Gu Haoyi has already been killed by me. You'll be the second." Yingxiong was slightly astonished. When he was parting ways with Gu Haoyi, the latter had already been at the late stage of the 7th heaven. After so long, he would have reached the peak stage of the 7th heaven no matter what, right? Yet, he was still killed by Ling Han. Ling Han's strength had soared again. However, a proud expression immediately appeared on Yingxiong's face as he said, "Gu Haoyi is Gu Haoyi, and I am me." As he said this, he didn't conceal his strength any longer. Boom! A devastating aura surged into the surroundings like crashing waves. At the same time, several ribbons of iridescent light also materialized around his body. 1, 2, 3, 4, 7, 8. 8 ribbons. He was clearly an 8th heaven celestial king. Ha ha ha! Yingxiong roared with laughter. "You guys have come too late. Not only have I obtained the inheritance of the sword formation, but I've even obtained boundless power. I already advanced to the 8th heaven 50,000 years ago." An 8th heaven supreme monarch star who had stabilized their cultivation definitely possessed astonishing battle prowess. They could reach the middle stage or even late stage of the 9th heaven in terms of power. Ling Han was unafraid. He had already stabilized his cultivation, and his battle prowess certainly wasn't weak, either. "Stop speaking nonsense. Come battle." Ling Han immediately drew his sword, and pointed it at Yingxiong. "Haha, I've advanced to the 8th heaven, and I've more so mastered a paramount secret technique. I'll take this opportunity to use you as a blood sacrifice, Yingxiong said with arrogance. He hooked his finger and said, "Come at me." Ling Han didn't hold back. Pang! With a bound, he instantly unleashed a terrifying speed, arriving before Yingxiong in a flash. He then stabbed with his sword. Wang! As he attacked, Ling Han's cultivation was also revealed, with his sixth heaven aura suffusing into the surroundings. "Oh, sixth heaven," Yingxiong said in astonishment. He genuinely hadn't imagined that Ling Han would advance so quickly. In fact, Ling Han's cultivation speed was far quicker than his. How long had passed? Yet, the gulf between them had already been reduced to 2 levels. This wasn't the mountain river tier or severing mundane tier, where ingesting any random celestial medicine could allow one's cultivation to soar in leaps and bounds. It was only because Yingxiong had obtained great opportunities the United Origin Manifestation Fruit could allow 9th Heaven Celestial Kings to become pseudo-heavenly venerates, and this Sword Mountain had more so accumulated power for heaven knows how many years that he had advanced from the 6th heaven to the 8th heaven. After a brief moment of astonishment, he quickly recovered his fervent killing intent. This young person was even more talented than him, so he definitely couldn't be left alive. Otherwise, there would eventually come a day when Yingxiong was surpassed. Yingxiong drew his spear, and used it like a staff. Pang pang pang. As he swung his spear, the regulations in the surroundings were instantly sent into disarray. This was due to both his own power and the power of the celestial tool. Through what did celestial kings display their might? Regulations. Now, however, the regulations had already been sent into chaos, so how could they still be used? Yingxiong's strike directly targeted the foundation, highlighting his experience and tact in battle. He smiled coldly. With his first strike, he had already gained an upper hand using his superior cultivation level. Afterward, he would follow up with a flurry of relentless attacks and completely shatter Ling Han's defenses. Ding! The divine demon sword struck the spear, causing numerous symbols to pulsate. This was a clash between the great Tao. Neither of them retreated. They were evenly matched. Yingxiong was truly astounded at this moment. Ling Han actually possessed the power to rival him. How was this possible? The regulations had already been scattered by him, so where had Ling Han obtained his power from? One had to realize that without the help of regulations, celestial kings would fall to the level of the severing mundane tier. Ling Han unleashed his power, shaking his right arm. Pang! Yingxiong was instantly sent flying. He brandished his sword saying, "So what if I'm at the 6th heaven?" Yingxiong was rendered speechless for a moment. He then said, "Now I truly believe that you killed Gu Hai. Your body art is astonishing, and combined with the power of regulations, your strength is no weaker than mine." He was a supreme monarch star, so if he refused to admit even this, he couldn't have made it to such a lofty height. "However, I can still kill you." His eyes gleamed with a divine light, showing off his confidence. Ling Han roared with laughter. "Don't say things the wrong way around. I'm the one who's going to kill you. In your dreams," Yingxiong said as he stabbed with his spear. While in the martial academy, even though there was a notion of strong and weak among Yingxiong, Gu Hai, and Miao Hua, the gap between them had been narrow and almost insignificant. After advancing to the 8th heaven and stabilizing his cultivation, however, Yingxiong's battle prowess was far superior to Gu Hai's. Yingxiong's spear stabbed, swept, and pushed, controlling the regulations in a terrifying display. Ling Han was at an absolute disadvantage in terms of wielding the regulations. There was no way for him to make up for the 2-level gap between them. However, his body art was far too powerful, and it didn't need to rely on external power. There was no need to borrow power from heaven and earth, and this was genuinely power that he possessed. He swung his divine demon sword, with his left hand casting the 3 lightning technique. He launched a barrage of chaotic attacks at Yingxiong. "Ha! You also mastered this kind of lightning technique?" Yingxiong exclaimed in astonishment. He hadn't obtained similar inheritances before, and it was only after arriving here that he had coincidentally obtained this inheritance. However, Ling Han had surprisingly mastered similar lightning techniques as well. Even though they were slightly different, it was extremely clear that they were derived from the same origin. "Haha! I'm going to kill you and then search your soul." I'm going to obtain all of these inheritances. Yingxiong said with roaring laughter. Ling Han chuckled coldly. Keep dreaming. Yingxiong didn't reply. Instead, he unleashed the full power of his spear. Ling Han wasn't weak either, with his battle prowess being no inferior to that of Yingxiong. Moreover, the divine demon sword was also superior to ordinary celestial tools. After several thousand exchanges, there was a clang as an edge of the celestial spear was chipped. Yingxiong was deeply astonished, and he hurriedly chased after the chipped piece. However, he was blocked by Ling Han and unable to retrieve it. After a period of struggle, the chipped piece was eventually obtained by Ling Han. Yingxiong wore a pained expression. That was divine metal. Even though it was a chipped piece, divine metal possessed the ability of regeneration. Thus, with enough time, this piece could eventually fuse back together with the spear. Now that Ling Han had obtained it, however, unless Yingxiong killed the former, he would be unable to get it back. Both were celestial tools, so how was his inferior to Ling Han's? Perhaps, that sword was forged from devouring metal, he said in deep astonishment. Only devouring metal could engulf divine metal to raise its level, thereby exceeding the level of divine metal and eventually becoming heavenly venerable tier metal. He wore an expression of extreme envy as he looked at Ling Han. That was devouring metal, something that could eventually become heavenly venerable tier metal. Yet, it was now in the hands of a sixth heaven celestial king. Just how fortunate was he? Did this signify the blessing of heaven and earth? Yingxiong took a deep breath. What did it matter even if Ling Han were blessed by heaven and earth? Yingxiong possessed absolute strength, so he would take it for himself. Chapter 2647. 2647 Final Destination. 2647 Final Destination. Die! Yingxiong roared as he unleashed his full strength and charged at Ling Han. Wang! His spear thrust forward, yet 7 bursts of golden sword light were unleashed. They were more so enveloped in lightning, appearing as weird as could be. This was the inheritance that he had obtained from this sword mountain. The lightning of metal. Wang! A spiritual attack surged over at the same time, extremely precise and potent in nature. Pain immediately stabbed at Ling Han's mind, causing his vision to go dark. The spiritual attack of an 8th Heaven Supreme Monarch Star was far too terrifying, and was far superior to what Xueqi could unleash. However, Ling Han had already increased the level of the indestructible Heaven Scroll. Even though it still had yet to reach the 8th heaven, it had still advanced after all. Thus, it was naturally able to better resist spiritual attacks. Ling Han guarded his mind as he continued to slash with his divine demon sword, launching a powerful counterattack. Ding ding ding. The two of them were locked in an intense battle. In terms of strength, there was truly little difference between them. However, it was definitely Ling Han who had the advantage. This was because his divine demon sword was forged from devouring metal, allowing its sharpness to be superior to ordinary celestial tools. After fighting for an extended period of time, other celestial tools would all be severed or shattered by the divine demon sword. After several thousand more exchanges, Yingxiong's spear lost another piece. This was something that he couldn't accept. If his celestial tool were shattered, what else would he use to block Ling Han's divine demon sword? Just you wait! Yingxiong roared in rage. He forced Ling Han back with a flick of his spear before turning around to leave. The day that I obtain all of the lightning technique inheritances will be the day that I cut off your head. He was completely unable to capture Ling Han at this moment. In fact, he was even at a disadvantage. Thus, he resolutely decided to leave, not hesitating in the least. Ling Han didn't give chase. He wasn't any stronger than Yingxiong, and he had only just obtained victory thanks to his divine demon sword. Let's obtain the inheritance of this place. The more lightning techniques that we fuse together, the more powerful they'll become. Ling Han said to the Empress. In any case, Yingxiong had fled already, so they only needed to worry about raising their own strength. The Empress nodded in agreement. Right now, she desired power even more than Ling Han. This was because she had been unable to help during the battle just then. She was an extremely proud person, so how could she accept this? The two of them walked to the center of the mountain peak, replacing Xiao Yingxiong. They had already obtained the secrets of the sword formation, so numerous golden symbols immediately materialized in their minds. However, no power entered their body this time, as it had all been absorbed by Xiao Yingxiong. If they wanted to obtain more power, they would need to wait for 1 or 2 epochs for this sword mountain to recover. Similarly, even if Xiao Yingxiong found the other lands of inheritance, he would only be able to obtain the inheritance of the 3 lightning techniques. He wouldn't be able to obtain the power of those lands anymore. Obtaining the secret technique was very quick. Without the process of acquiring power, grasping the inheritance only took Ling Han and the Empress several days. Because they were afraid of Xiao Yingxiong charging back and launching a surprise attack on them as they cultivated, they decided to leave the Sword Mountain and enter the celestial guest residence. After tens of thousands of years, the two of them finally mastered the lightning of metal and fused it together with the 3 lightning technique, creating the 4 lightning technique. Even though only one of the 5 elements is missing, the might of this technique is still far inferior, Ling Han said with a shake of his head. This was clear when looking at the indestructible heaven scroll. This was also a heavenly venerate technique, and just how powerful was it? The 5 elements lightning technique was most likely not weak. However, Ling Han was confident that if he advanced the indestructible heaven scroll to an equivalent level, the 4 lightning technique would definitely be unable to breach its defenses. There was only a single reason for this. They hadn't gathered all 5 elements yet. As such, this heavenly venerate technique was unable to unleash its full might. In fact, it was possible that it could only unleash 1/10 of its might. Going from 4 to 5 elements would be a qualitative change. Then we need to obtain the 5th inheritance as soon as possible, the Empress said. Ling Han nodded in agreement, saying, "We have to obtain it before Xiao Yingxiong. Otherwise, they would indeed obtain the inheritance, but they would miss out on the power." They exited the celestial guest residence and continued to advance. 4 of the 5 lands of inheritance had already appeared, yet it was clear that they were already about to reach the end of this ancient tomb. Large expanses of mountains and rivers flashed past beneath them, with a couple not stopping to communicate with any of the people that they passed. Right now, they only had a single goal: to reach the 5th land of inheritance. Even though they didn't waste any time communicating with others, there were always those who obtained information far too slowly. These people had only just received the news that Ling Han and the Empress were outsiders who had come here to train. Thus, they especially rushed over to attack them. However, how could 8th Heaven Celestial Kings possibly rival the 2 of them? These people were naturally suppressed in an instant. However, Ling Han and the Empress also learned some secrets from these Celestial Kings. According to rumors, the end of this ancient tomb not only held the inheritances of paramount techniques, but it even had a passageway that led out of the Celestial King graveyard. However, the prerequisite was that one reached the 9th heaven. Thus, all of the 9th heaven Celestial Kings had already gone to that place. Ling Han leaned toward believing this. This was because they indeed hadn't been attacked by any 9th heaven Celestial Kings. However, whether or not this rumor was true needed to be confirmed. Desolate Moon. It was Desolate Moon who had led people into this ancient tomb, and he had even tossed out 3 scrolls of the 9 transformations divine scroll. If it were said that the combined strength of countless celestial kings was required to open the path to this ancient tomb, Ling Han would definitely believe this. However, to offer 3 scrolls of the 9 transformations divine scroll for this, Ling Han certainly didn't believe this. This was because simply spreading news about this large tomb would definitely be enticing enough by itself. The truth was most likely hidden at the end of the ancient tomb. Ling Han glanced at the Empress, and she replied with a nod. With their strength they could attempt to explore that area. 7 months later, they arrived before an unbelievably grand palace. It towered into the clouds, and it was surrounded by arcs of lightning. It appeared dignified and profound. This was the final destination of this ancient tomb. They knew this because there was only a boundless expanse of void after this palace. This void couldn't be traversed. Looking from the outside, this palace appeared as desolate as could be. It was as if it were an abandoned land. All of the 9th heaven celestial kings are inside here? This is truly uncanny. If so many 9th heaven celestial kings are inside there, why isn't there any noise or commotion? Ling Han said in a soft voice. The Empress tightened her grip on her celestial tool. Meanwhile, her left hand held onto Ling Han's right. Ling Han smiled as he clasped his hand around the Empress' slender hand. They then strode forward. This palace was far too tall, so there was actually still a long distance to travel between seeing it and actually arriving before it. When they arrived before the gates of the palace, they saw a group of people furiously attacking the gates. Strangely, however, it was clear that the gates of the palace were wide open. However, like a crashing waterfall, bolts of lightning blocked the entrance. This was a group of 4 people. They were attacking in unison, yet the wall of lightning remained completely unaffected. They were unable to pass it. Upon sensing Ling Han and the Empress' arrival, the 4 people immediately stopped their attacks and turned around. A smile involuntarily spread across Ling Han's face. This world was truly far too small. This was none other than Wang Dongsen and the others, the second-generation young masters from prosperous opening city. In the past, their group had consisted of more than 4 people. However, it was likely that some of them had died on their way here. After all, this wasn't prosperous opening city where they could act as they pleased. Li Long! Wang Dongsen immediately exclaimed upon seeing Ling Han. When Yingxiong and the others had attacked Ling Han before, they had caught sight of Ling Han's true appearance. Thus, they immediately recognized him. Ling Han's voice was calm as he said, "Immediately piss off if you don't want to die." What an arrogant person! Wang Dongsen said in great displeasure. He was a 7th heaven celestial king, so Ling Han should have referred to him as senior or lord when seeing him. Yet, he actually dared to tell him to piss off. Even though Ling Han could escape from the clutches of Yingxiong and the others, signifying his strength, could he possibly rival Wang Dongsen? You ruined my father's grand plans. See how I chop off your head. Chapter 2648. 2648 5 Elements Lightning. 2648 5 Elements Lightning. Wang Dongsen had good reason to hate Ling Han. If Zhang Feiyu had successfully remained hidden in Ghost King City at that time, the Ghost King City would have eventually been conquered by prosperous opening city. However, because of Ling Han, their plans had all been ruined. In the end, prosperous opening city had needed to sacrifice a great deal to calm the fury of Ghost King City. Ling Han was naturally to blame for all of this. Thus, not only did Tang Mingbo, Lu Gaoquan, and the others want to kill Ling Han, but even those from prosperous opening city wanted him dead. Now that they had come across each other, Wang Dongsen was naturally red-eyed with anger. How noisy! Ling Han said as he launched a palm strike at Wang Dongsen. At this moment, how could he treat Wang Dongsen with any sense of seriousness? Only 9th heaven celestial kings or supreme monarch stars like Yingxiong and Miao Hua could be viewed as his opponents. This kind of insignificant person would be killed with a single slap. They didn't deserve to waste his time. You're seeking death. Wang Dongsen roared upon seeing Ling Han's dismissive attitude. He was enraged, and he crossed his hands as he unleashed a celestial technique, summoning a frightening battle prowess. He then launched an attack at Ling Han. As his celestial technique circulated, it transformed into a golden dragon turtle that reared its head. Its maw was filled with razor-sharp teeth, each formed from a symbol. Ling Han's palm strike arrived. Pang! The dragon turtle was immediately reduced to smithereens. The large hand continued to press down, crushing Wang Dongsen, who was wearing an expression of shock and disbelief. As a measly 7th heaven emperor tier, how could he possibly block a casual strike from Ling Han? A rain of blood descended, landing on the faces and bodies of the 3 other people. They finally recovered from their shock and regained their senses. As powerful as Wang Dongsen was, he was actually killed by Ling Han in a single strike. The 3 of them exchanged a glance before fleeing, not even daring to think about doing battle. The Empress immediately lashed out, casually unleashing 3 sword strikes to kill them. It seems like these gates aren't easy to enter, Ling Han said. There's not a single 9th heaven celestial king in sight, so these gates clearly can't stop them, the Empress said with a nod. Ling Han walked over saying, let's give it a go. He raised his foot, making contact with the wall of lightning. The bolts of lightning wavered as if they were about to unleash a devastating strike. However, they immediately calmed down again as if they approved of Ling Han. Ling Han was astonished. These bolts of lightning were just about to attack me, yet the four lightning technique within me suddenly started to circulate. The two reached resonance, and these bolts of lightning ceased their attack. The Empress also walked forward to try. Sure enough, this was the case. By the looks of it, the final inheritance is inside this palace, the Empress said. The two of them entered the palace, only to be greeted by an expanse of emptiness. All that they could see were towering columns that were 300 meters in diameter. The golden floor tiles also reflected a dazzling and colorful brilliance. Where are the people? Where have they all gone? The two of them continued to advance. After a short while, they reached the end of the level. What appeared before them was a flight of stairs. They walked up the stairs to the second level. After wandering around the second level, they arrived before a set of stairs to the third level. Repeating this process again and again, they eventually arrived on the 9th level. This level was finally different. The floor tiles weren't golden, but instead multicolored and extremely varied. By the looks of it, the inheritance should be here. The two of them continued to walk around. However, in contrast to before, this place didn't unleash any attacks at them. After circling around the entire level, both Ling Han and the Empress wore expressions of puzzlement. They hadn't discovered any clues. They walked around several more times, trying to use different methods to analyze the situation. However, they were still unable to make any inroads. Perhaps this is only a decoy? Let's go upstairs to take a look. They arrived on the 10th level, only to discover that this level was also decorated with multicolored floor tiles. What the heck? They wandered around this level as well, yet they were still unable to make head nor tail of the situation. They went up another level, only to discover that the 11th level was identical as well. Then the 12th, 13th, and all the way up to the 18th level. All of these levels were decorated with multicolored floor tiles. However, starting from the 19th level, the floor tiles returned to their original appearance again. The 20th and 21st levels were also like that. Ling Han and the Empress didn't go up to the 22nd level. Instead, they made their way back down. I'm sure that the final inheritance is here, Ling Han said. The Empress nodded in agreement. We should consider the 9 levels together. They returned to the first 9 levels, and committed all of the multicolored floor tiles to memory. They then visualized them in their minds. If we stack the 9 levels together, and only consider the floor tiles with the same overlapping colors, it actually forms a word. Ling Han suddenly opened his eyes and exclaimed in surprise. The 16th level, the 967th row, the 3666th column, the Empress said. They hurriedly made their way to the 16th level, and found the corresponding floor tile. After stepping on it, they once again recalled the image of the 9 levels stacked together. An extremely powerful intent instantly surged into their minds. This heavenly venerate is primordial ancient. Now that I'm venturing off to face hysteria, it's difficult to say whether there will be a day of return. I fear the loss of my Tao, so I've especially left 5 lands of inheritance. Only those who have obtained the 4 previous inheritances have the right to enter this hall and obtain my ultimate technique. Boom! Immediately afterward, countless arcs of lightning flashed in their minds, forming symbol after symbol. This was the final piece of the 5 elements lightning technique, the lightning of earth. However, it was a shame that this final land of inheritance wasn't a formation. Thus, there was naturally no bestowal of power. However, compared to obtaining a heavenly venerate technique, the elevation of one's cultivation could completely be pushed aside and ignored. After all, this only required time. The inheritance was swift, and the two of them reopened their eyes after only 7 days. They both wore expressions of delight. After walking some distance away, they entered the celestial guest residence to immediately fuse the 5 different lightning techniques together. This would allow them to obtain the genuine heavenly venerate technique. Mastering the lightning of earth was actually very simple. Ling Han completed this process in only 3,000 years. However, fusing the 5 lightning techniques together would be far more difficult. This was because the separated techniques could only be counted as celestial king techniques, rendering them easy to grasp. However, the fuse technique was a genuine heavenly venerate technique, so it was naturally incredibly difficult to master. We still need to thank the primordial ancient Heavenly Venerate for splitting the 5 elements lightning technique into 5 separate techniques. As long as one manages to comprehend the 5 elements and their birth of all matter, one will have a sliver of a chance to grasp this Heavenly Venerate technique. Otherwise, even 9th Heaven Celestial Kings will struggle to grasp this technique. No wonder it's said that each Heavenly Venerate is unique. Ling Han sighed with emotion. He then sat still with his legs crossed, silently activating his time physique. He wanted to grasp this paramount technique as quickly as possible. 1 year, 10 years, 100 years, 10,000 years, 1 million years, 10 million years. Time quickly flashed by, with 40 million years having already passed. Inside the celestial guest residence, Ling Han and the Empress were under the influence of accelerated time. Thus, accounting for this, they had already experienced a whopping 40 billion years. On some day, Ling Han suddenly opened his eyes, with an arc of lightning flashing across his pupils. With a thought, countless arcs of lightning instantly materialized around him. They weren't white, however, but of 9 different colors instead. I've finally managed to fuse the 5 elements together. Right now, I still have yet to grasp the fundamental power of the Genesis world, so I can only summon the 5 elements lightning using the power of regulations. However, the regulations of the 5 elements and the regulation of lightning result in a resonance of 6 regulations, so the might that can be unleashed isn't simply a sum of their might. Just how powerful will it be? In any case, I'll worry about this later. I need to face a tribulation first. Ling Han exited the celestial guest residence, and dark clouds instantly appeared overhead, lightning flashing amid them. After 40 billion years of cultivation, Ling Han had naturally reached the peak stage of the 6th heaven. Borrowing the opportunity when successfully fusing the Heavenly Venerate technique together, Ling Han resolutely pushed open the gates to the 7th heaven. Chapter 2649, 2649 Miracle. 2649 Miracle. Even in this grand hall, heavenly tribulation still came and went as it pleased. However, this palace was indeed extraordinary. Theoretically speaking, heavenly tribulation should have formed outside the palace. The first bolt of lightning would then directly destroy the palace. It was because of this that people went to desolate locations to face heavenly tribulation. Here, however, heavenly tribulation directly appeared beneath the roof of the story. Dark clouds gathered, amid which lightning flashed. This was extremely strange. Perhaps heavenly tribulation knew that it couldn't damage this palace, so it directly appeared in this level. This wasn't impossible. This was because the might of heavenly tribulation also had its limits, the peak stage of the 9th heaven. However, heavenly venerates had exceeded this limit, so how could their constructions be damaged by heavenly tribulation? Why were heavenly venerates detested by heaven and earth? It was naturally because they had broken the rules of heaven and earth. At this moment, all kinds of thoughts rushed through Ling Han's mind. However, he immediately focused his attention on the tribulation. Crack! The first bolt of lightning slammed down, its might reaching the middle stage of the 9th heaven. Ling Han channeled the 5 elements lightning technique as he faced this strike, and he was unexpectedly able to manipulate the power of heavenly tribulation. Meanwhile, he also summoned his divine demon sword. Following his advance in cultivation, he naturally needed to elevate the level of the divine demon sword as well. In his mind, his celestial seed was undergoing its 7th transformation. Bolts of lightning continued to slam down. However, a large portion of their energy was absorbed by the divine demon sword and the 5 elements lightning technique. Even so, heavenly tribulation at the 9th heaven wasn't so easy to face. Ling Han was still riddled with wounds as he faced the remnant power from the bolts of lightning. In comparison, his indestructible celestial king physique, which had only just reached the 7th level, was truly a bit too weak. It seemed completely powerless against the destructive power of the 9th heaven. One day later, heavenly tribulation dissipated. Ling Han observed his own power, and a bitter smile involuntarily appeared on his face. This advance can be regarded as the advance where my power has increased the least. Because the energy of the dimension scroll had already been exhausted, his body art remained on the same level as before. His body art was the main source of his battle prowess, and it had already reached the pinnacle of the early stage of the 9th heaven. It was now approaching the middle stage. This time, only his power of regulations became more powerful. Even so, it had only been at the peak stage of the 8th heaven to begin with, and while it had now indeed advanced to the 9th heaven, it had only reached the early stage of the 9th heaven. Combined with his body art, Ling Han's battle prowess had now reached the middle stage of the 9th heaven. It could be said that his battle prowess had only improved by very little. This is also because the gulf between the 8th heaven and the 9th heaven is far too great. Combined with my body art, it's as if I haven't advanced at all. If he still had had a dimension scroll, his body art would have improved as well, so his battle prowess might have reached the peak stage of the 9th heaven. At the very least, it would have reached the late stage of the 9th heaven. However, Ling Han raised his hand, activating the 5 elements lightning technique. Gold, azure, black, red, and yellow intertwined together before there was a flash of white lightning that instantly transformed 9-colored divine lightning that pulsated in his palm. He could manipulate it in any form he wanted. Combining all 5 types of lightning together has led to a qualitative change. The might of a single strike can allow me to unleash destructive power at the peak stage of the 9th heaven. I've never come across such a powerful secret technique before. As expected of a heavenly venerate technique. However, with my current strength, I can only unleash 9 such strikes at most. After all, this is a heavenly venerate technique, and its might is far too extreme. If I can obtain all 9 scrolls of the 9 transformations divine scroll, and if I can channel each individually, I'll be able to maintain my explosive strength for longer. Shame, I still need 6 more scrolls. Instead of moping around here, I might as well test out Wally's models. I'll see if I can directly extract the 6 fundamental powers. Ling Han immediately stopped moping around, and started to mull over how he could resolve this problem. In any case, the Empress was still cultivating in seclusion, so he had much time on his hands. Ling Han started to channel Wally's model. He had initially used this cultivation technique to absorb power from the Dimension Scroll, but he was now using it on the entire heaven and earth. In fact, Ling Han had already attempted this before in the celestial realm. However, he hadn't succeeded at the time. However, Ling Han hadn't been a celestial king at that time, either, and the celestial realm was more so a super low-level dimension. Meanwhile, this place was a transcendent dimension. The difference between the two was immense, so it was worth another try. Ling Han sat down cross-legged. He didn't enter the celestial guest residence this time, as the barrier of divine metal would affect his communication with heaven and earth. He sat as still as a boulder, not forgetting to also accelerate time. As for enemies finding him, he didn't worry about this at all. With his current strength, he could leave with composure and ease even if he came across a 9th heaven celestial king at the peak stage. In fact, if Ling Han suddenly unleashed the 5 elements lightning technique, it was possible that those at the peak stage of the 9th heaven might even die by his hands. 10 years, 100 years, 700 years. Ling Han was still unable to sense the fundamental power of the Genesis world. This was very normal. After all, only heavenly venerates could sense, grasp, and channel the 6 fundamental powers. Moreover, this was only heavenly venerates above the first tier. This was because first-tier heavenly venerates could only use the unique power of each dimension. In some sense, they could be regarded as pseudo-heavenly venerates. Ling Han was only at the 7th heaven, yet he wanted to ascend the heavens with a single stride. However, Ling Han was no fool, and he naturally had his own reason for doing. She had once absorbed void particle energy before, and he also had the model that had taken Wally countless years to create. Wally was more so the culmination of hundreds of epochs of knowledge. With this in mind, maybe perhaps, Ling Han would have a sliver of a chance. Ling Han became increasingly calm and relaxed as his mind entered a state of wandering around the outside world. A minute particle suddenly rushed into his body. In terms of size, this particle was as small as could be. In terms of quality, however, what this particle possessed was utterly terrifying. This infinitesimally small particle possessed the power to obliterate heaven and earth. Pa! The particle suddenly burst apart, transforming into a storm of violent energy that coursed through Ling Han's body. Wah! Ling Han shuddered violently before vomiting a mouthful of blood. He felt as if 2/3 of his bones had been instantly broken. In fact, he had almost been killed. This is void particle energy. That particle had been none other than a void particle. He had absorbed a single one, yet the energy contained within it had been far too terrifying. The explosion of that particle that couldn't be seen with the naked eye had almost killed Ling Han. One had to realize that he was a seventh heaven celestial king whose battle prowess could reach the middle stage of the ninth heaven, yet he was almost unable to withstand this strike. However, Ling Han wasn't afraid. Instead, he was absolutely ecstatic. He had attracted a void particle. If he told others about this, they definitely wouldn't believe him. Even a first-tier heavenly venerate couldn't draw on the 6 fundamental powers, so how could Ling Han, a seventh heaven celestial king, do so? Cough, cough. Ling Han roared with laughter as blood continued to drip from his mouth. He hurriedly channeled the indestructible heaven scroll to heal his wounds. He then guided the chaotic energy inside his body, using it to temper himself. Right now, he was still unable to directly absorb void particle energy. Instead, he could only use this method of tempering to strengthen his body art. Doing so was like taking a huge detour, but being able to manipulate this heavenly venerable tier power while at the celestial king tier was definitely worth it. In fact, it would be worth it even if things were 100 times more difficult. I'm still too weak, so I needed 1,000 years to attract a single void particle. The dimension scroll was much better. Not only could I extract its energy at any time, but its power was also gentle and not chaotic like this wild particle. Ling Han shook his head as he muttered this complaint. He then started to cultivate again. Chapter 2650. 2650 Gathered Together. 2650 Gathered Together. Without the dimension scroll, directly absorbing the fundamental power of the Genesis world was far too difficult. As freakish as Ling Han was, and even though he had already come across void particle energy before, it still took him upwards 1,000 years to finally attract a single void particle. However, this was only the beginning of his pain. The explosion of chaotic energy left him severely wounded. Ling Han continued to cycle through this process. He would attract a void particle with much difficulty, and then he would suffer severe wounds after withstanding its chaotic explosion. He would then continue to heal his wounds as he extracted the particle's energy to temper his physique. Without a doubt, this was an agonizing process. However, Ling Han could indeed feel his body art improving. Even though this was a slow process, one that couldn't compare to extracting energy from the dimension scroll, it was still like opening a treasure chamber. A dimension scroll could be exhausted, yet as long as the Genesis world wasn't destroyed, fundamental power would never be exhausted. Thus, this second method could be used forever. What was the most important? Ling Han could already sense and absorb void particle energy. This signified that as long as he could become a first-tier heavenly venerate, he was guaranteed to eventually become a second-tier heavenly venerate. After another 7 million years, the Empress also concluded her cultivation. She had also mastered the 5 elements lightning technique, and she had more so reached the barrier to the 7th heaven. The Empress faced her tribulation. This was a difficult process as the higher one's cultivation level, the more brutal heavenly tribulation would become. This was especially the case for Supreme Monarch stars who had to experience heavenly tribulation that was far superior to their cultivation level. Fortunately, relying on her mastery of the 5 elements lightning, she was able to reduce the threat that the bolts of lightning posed to her. After successfully overcoming her tribulation, the Empress entered the celestial guest residence to stabilize her cultivation. Meanwhile, Ling Han had already completed this process long ago. He stood up and strode forward. This palace very likely held an ultimate secret, and this was something that piqued his interest. However, just as he stood up, he heard footsteps approaching from behind him. He turned around, and he involuntarily raised a brow. Yingxiong, Miao Hua. The two of them had actually entered the palace together. According to the intentions of the primordial ancient heavenly venerate, only those who had mastered the 4 previous lightning techniques could pass the wall of lightning and enter this area. Thus, these two had most likely obtained all 4 lightning technique inheritances as well. After all, they were all supreme monarch stars, so it was only natural that they possessed such powerful comprehension ability. However, it was rumored that all of the 9th heaven celestial kings were in this place, so how had they passed the wall of lightning? Perhaps those at the 9th heaven could pass without obstruction. Many questions flashed through Ling Han's mind. However, killing intent spread across his face as he said, "You too have come to seek death?" "Wrong. We've come to kill you," Yingxiong said coldly, directly retrieving his celestial spear. His luck wasn't as good as Ling Han's, and it had taken him an extremely long time to find and obtain all 4 of the lightning technique inheritances. Only then could he come to this final destination. Coincidentally, he had come across Miao Hua during this process. Indeed, he truly hadn't sought out Miao Hua on purpose. "We'll settle this today," Ling Han said as he drew his divine demon sword. If they left the Celestial King graveyard, the heavenly venerates of the Martial Academy would definitely prevent them from killing each other. Thus, it was necessary to settle their differences here. "Killing you will be as easy as killing a chicken," Miao Hua said in contempt. He also retrieved a celestial staff. Boom! His 8th heaven aura was as vast as the sea. Miao Hua had already advanced to the 8th heaven tens of millions of years ago, so after so many years, he had already reached the late stage of the 8th heaven. His battle prowess had more so soared to the late stage of the 9th heaven. The higher one's cultivation level, the weaker their ability to surpass tiers. Only supreme monarch stars could remain so impressive. Boom! Yingxiong also unleashed his own aura. He was also at the late stage of the 8th heaven. Ling Han remained unfazed as he held his divine demon sword flat. He extended his left hand and made a hooking motion with his fingers. "Come at me!" "Arrogant," the 2 supreme prodigies said with a cold chuckle. They then attacked in unison. One thrust with his spear, while the other swept with his staff. They didn't need to cooperate. At their level, any casual attack would possess a high level of coordination. Ling Han swung his sword and met their attacks. Wang! His divine demon sword caught both their spear and staff. A colossal power surged over, instantly pushing his arm back. Only when his arm was about to hit his face did it finally stop. He roared loudly as he unleashed his body art. Pang! The spear and staff were both pushed back. 7 ribbons of iridescent light materialized around him, making him appear like a deity. 7th heaven! Yingxiong and Miao Hua exclaimed in shock. Yingxiong was especially astonished. During his previous battle with Ling Han had only just advanced to the 6th heaven. Now, however, he was already at the 7th heaven. After so many years, Yingxiong had only advanced from the early stage of the 8th heaven to the late stage. He hadn't even reached the peak stage. If he wanted to advance to the 9th heaven, that would more so require at least 50 million years. That would already be extremely quick, astonishingly quick. Compared to Ling Han, however, was his cultivation speed not as slow as a snail. If this trend continued, when Yingxiong advanced to the 9th heaven, Ling Han would also be about to advance to this level. Yingxiong looked at Miao Hua and said, "We can't hold back. We definitely have to kill him today." "Agreed," Miao Hua said with a nod. He glared at Ling Han as he raised the staff in his hands. Wang wang wang. Symbols lit up on the staff. Heaven-facing staff, Celestial King's bow. He unleashed an attack. Boom! The celestial staff slammed down. With his 9th heaven battle prowess, he was able to unleash the full might of the divine metal. As his staff swung, a sheet of dazzling gold appeared around it. At the same time, he also unleashed a spiritual attack. Die! He was the first to attack. Meanwhile, Yingxiong stood to the side, waiting for Ling Han to expose a weakness. At that time, he would deliver the killing blow and end Ling Han's life. The spiritual attack ignored all sense of distance as it arrived, immediately causing Ling Han to grasp his head in pain. Ha ha! Miao Hua roared with laughter. He was extremely confident in his spiritual attack. As long as his spiritual attack wasn't cancelled out by his opponents, it could easily cause his foe to suffer gripping pain in their mind, causing them to become sluggish. If his opponent were weaker, his spiritual attack could directly shatter their mind and end their life. Ling Han had already been struck. When Miao Hua's staff landed, Miao Hua would seize this opportunity to turn Ling Han into a pancake. As simple as that? Confusion spread across Yingxiong's face. He had battled with Ling Han before, with the two of them being evenly matched. However, Ling Han's celestial tool was forged from devouring metal, which had forced him to retreat and flee. Was Ling Han this weak? Be careful of trickery, he hurriedly warned. Miao Hua scoffed in disdain. Ling Han had already been struck by his spiritual attack, so even if he were purposefully showing a weakness, this would now be a genuine weakness. He would send Ling Han on his way. His staff slammed down. Ling Han suddenly raised his head, with a bolt of 9-colored lightning crackling in his left hand as he swung it toward the staff. Striking a celestial tool with your bare hand. Who do you think you are? You're seeking death. Miao Hua snickered upon seeing this, and his staff continued to slam down. Even if Ling Han were trying to trick him, this would still be a case of his genius leading to his own demise. Wang! Ling Han's hand had already caught the celestial staff. Pa! With the destructive power of a celestial tool and the fearsome might of the 9th heaven, Ling Han's palm was obliterated in an instant. His 7th heaven physique was nowhere near powerful enough. However, Miao Hua also shuddered involuntarily. This was because a bolt of devastating lightning had surged through the celestial staff and entered his body. Not only did this cause him to become numb, but his bones and internal organs were also blasted into smithereens by the lightning in an instant. It was also at this moment that Ling Han slashed down with his sword. He was expressionless, as if it weren't his hand that had been shattered just then. His gaze was harrowingly cold. Stop! Xiao Yingxiong roared as he hurriedly launched an attack, attempting to block Ling Han. However, was this not too late? Pooh! The divine demon sword directly stabbed into Miao Hua's HYD. You're tuning in to the Xueqi's Martial Arts Saga YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.